We'll start tonight's meeting. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
You guys,
Gentlemen.
what a surprise. Hello, Mr. Hines. How are you? Very well, thank you. Barry, how you doing?
All right.
I need to turn on the recorder, gents.
Yeah, this is so terrific.
I gotta sit on myself.
You decided to change
All right.
seats?
All right, do we have any public comments tonight? That's item number 1 is public comments. Do we have any? Okay. No. Okay, we have some minutes to accept. We have the minutes from March 20th. That's today, March 6th. March 6th minutes. And I make a motion that we move to accept and approve the meeting minutes of March 6th, 2018 as shown. Second. Thank you, Cheryl. Anybody have any questions or concerns about the minutes of March 6th? Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. Correspondence items, we have A through K. A motion that we move to accept the list of correspondences as shown, A through K. Give a second.
Second, with a comment on J,
J, okay?
mass lease space. Andrew, do we have any idea where we might offer lease space up to the Commonwealth?
Yeah, so we get directives like that from time to time from different departments in the Commonwealth, and we typically send them out to our local office parks, property management companies, Lincoln Properties, CBRE, and so on. So sometimes what they're looking for
Okay.
is a nice fit, sometimes it's not. But we're basically just a conduit to the local developers that the state wouldn't necessarily be able to keep track of.
Gotcha. So we forwarded that on.
That's correct, and we do. We've had that actually, like, since the day it went out to Lincoln Properties and the others.
Thank you. Sit, Mr. Chair.
All right, so I'm going to amend the motion because there was an L, so the motion should actually read, move to accept and approve the list of correspondences as shown A through L.
Second.
So, anybody have any discussion on number L, letter L? Okay, all those in favor? Thank you. Stop. No consent agenda. So number 5, the Magic AARP letter of support. And that's move to accept and approve support for the Magic AARP grant application. For a second.
I'll second. Melissa.
Okay. You told us everybody about that one, Andy, please.
So MAGIC is our regional planning organization. It involves 13 communities. They've partnered with 14th with Westford, added in on this regional grant opportunity that AARP is offering. This is a letter of support for the application. We've actually, our planning department's had some involvement with it, but other towns have taken the lead. This is just an opportunity for us to access these funds. And it's an opportunity to make Maynard and this whole region more age-friendly.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about the Magic letter, grant? All those in favor? Thank you. It's, Melissa, can you just pass that on? Yeah. Thanks. Power field discussion. Yeah, you guys are up.
You want to stand up?
Don't want to stand up? I can stand up. Yeah, you want to stand up?
Jim can stand up.
That's fine. Mary, how are you? Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I love LinkedIn. Everybody knows that.
Here's the mouse, whoever wants to operate.
Okay.
It's a nice big TV now, huh?
You'll see see the slideshow momentarily. Jim.
Okay.
The birthday boy is here.
Can I move it over?
No.
It's Aaron's birthday.
There he is, yeah.
Happy birthday, Aaron. Should we sing?
That's why I really came. We came because it was Aaron's birthday. So, thanks for having us. My name is Jim Hines. For those of you who don't know me, I am the president of Friends of Maynard Soccer, which is not to be confused with Maynard Youth Soccer. It's a different organization. We started this organization really to support the school soccer program, in addition to other soccer. You know, we do support youth soccer, but our main goal is to support the school soccer program, which has over 100 kids in the high school, JV, and middle school programs. This main thrust of it was to, help renovate fields, and really this was started by Steve Jones, who really, years and years ago, has started really focused on Fowler Field and trying to improve it and renovate it. Barry Roach is also with us, and he is also one of the members of Friends of Maynard Soccer. It's basically a bunch of concerned parents who are trying to see if we can't do something to make Fowler better. So, there we go. So 2 years ago, I don't think anybody needs to kind of underscore, how bad Fowler Field is. It's I think everybody who's had kids playing there for the last 10 to 15 years knows it's really, not a soccer field. It's a soccer/baseball/softball field. The fields aren't big enough to have, fields where it's all grass. They're playing on the dirt infield sometimes, and the grass just doesn't grow there. So there was no irrigation there. We had the pH measure, which doesn't mean anything to me, but it was measured at 4, and I guess that's really bad. So it wasn't draining. It's really a tough field, but it's a big field, and it's a field that the soccer program uses. The school program, it's their main practice facility. It's also where both JV, the boys and girls JV, play their games there, so that we have towns coming in and visiting and playing on Fowler Field as well, the middle school. So there's 4 teams playing in it, sometimes 6 teams practicing and playing. So you'll see in 2 games going on, you'll see kids, again, practicing on the pitcher's mound, practicing, they're all over the place. The thing with Fowler Field is I think it's just one of those things that it's never really been prioritized. I mean, there's obviously there's so many things that the school has to do in terms of where they spend their funds, and Fowler has just been kind of like, well, we'll do our best and we'll try to manage it. But again, no irrigation, grass doesn't grow, the pH levels are really bad. So we've been really focused on working with, essentially the CPC. We started by having them fund a study to make recommendations for field renovation. And again, it's a big space. We have the study here, if anyone would like to take a look at it. The original delivery from VHB was an initial price tag of $1.5 million, which quite honestly, I don't think anybody has any expectation that we would be able to, really renovate the field at that kind of number. Still, we kept kind of pushing on. We went to CPC and asked for an initial commitment to kind of put in a kitty some funds for us so that we could kind of keep moving on, and that happened last year. They put $50,000 aside for us, knowing that we would hopefully get to some. And then we also worked, probably a little more than Aaron would care to. We've worked with DPW quite closely and VHB to try to create, a more reasonably viable number, like a price tag that we think that we could get to, because again, $1.5 million was just not going to happen. So we also achieved 501c3 status. So we were able to fundraise, and that way it can be a charitable deduction. We have raised over $10,000. We had another $15,000 pledged from Maynard Youth Soccer, who we've all been involved with over the years, and are very near and dear to us, and that organization is very near and dear to us, and I think it's a great organization. We've worked closely. I can't say enough about CPC, John, Ellen, Bill, Rick, John, Tom, Randy, and Steve have been phenomenal. They've asked great questions, but they've been supportive throughout the whole last couple of years. And, you know, and so we have kind of come back to us. So let's see, where am I? All right, so VHB came back with a different proposal for us. And this is kind of a breakdown of what we think needs to happen in order to get Fowler Field renovated. I don't go into the details about the different things, but to do the field is going to be about $250,000, $260,000. There is an add alternate that we put into the project, the bid of irrigation, which they've kind of estimated $150,000.
Could you explain add alternate, in case anyone doesn't know what it is?
I don't. Want
I could try.
Barrett's going to explain add alternate to you.
So it's going to take about 15 minutes. If that's
Super.
okay. No, it's basically, you know, you put together a plan, and, you know, in order for us to put this out to bid, we have to have at least the base amount of the plan. And if we wanted to get something extra done, and we can have it as an add alternate. So the contractors can bid on that top list, and then say, oh yeah, and here's what it would cost to get irrigation done. So it's another kind of, you know, if you wanted this also, it's you know, it's $150,000.
Thank you. And then there was a contingency of about 20%, which is $50,000. You know, we really think while it's about $250,000 to renovate it, and there is a water source down there. Really feel like irrigation would really make the project be a viable one and a sustainable one. This is an estimate, and probably Aaron would probably better to talk to it. But we know that you know, Aaron's done a great job of really renovating the alumni field. It's done really, you know, that's really come a long ways, and kind of use that kind of as a benchmark for what would cost. Again, the other thing, so, you know, I think $10,000, we're kind of ballparking that. But Friends of Maynard Soccer, one of the things that we want to do is we want to be able to support that. So that's part of our fundraising, and potentially going out to secure corporate sponsorships, is so that we can have a yearly maintenance kitty that can kind of supplement what DPW needs in the event that it does cost over and above, because again, it's a big field, and there are challenges that go along with that.
And Jim, if I could just jump in.
Sure.
So this is typical with the high school front field. So the town gives us the labor, they have the machinery, and we work with them, but they may not be able to purchase something that's like non-capital, like seed or fertilizer. And that's where Maynard Soccer would come in and buy those things, work with Aaron to make sure that they're available. So that's where the kind of 10,000 is, and we can budget for that through field usage fees, and also people fundraising, and also people give an optional field fee when they register for Maynard Soccer.
Any questions up to this point?
Yeah. Did you explore, by any chance, and if there would be a cost differential with a private maintenance group? Sort of like what the Little League does.
You know, we haven't explored it, and I don't know if we're at that point to explore it yet, right? I mean, Aaron, I'll let Aaron maybe speak to that. Is that fair?
Yeah, so currently the way the maintenance works on school department fields, athletic fields, and as well as the town-owned Crow Park, we use private maintenance for some of the specialty functions that we can't provide in-house. So it's a combination. We try to utilize as much of our in-house labor as possible, and we don't have that expertise and that specialized equipment. We'll call in a turf specialist to come in and assist. So we currently do that mix to try to save as much money, but utilize those skills that we don't have.
And in theory, potentially, if we decide that makes sense, then that's something that we could fund as well with, hopefully, you know, our extra funds that we fundraise for. So this is kind of a breakdown of where we think we are and what we think we need. Sorry, it's kind of cloudy. I know you have a couple hard copies if they want to hold it. So CPC, we went back to CPC after the initial $50,000. We've asked for an additional $150,000. Weather permitting, we were hoping to have that vote tomorrow. I don't know if the meeting is going to happen or not. It seems like we've been kind of in this kind of perpetual weather state for the last few weeks. But so the hope was that we'd have another $150,000 to add to that 50. Do you want to speak to the fact that there's a possibility, because there was a conversation had at
So-
the last meeting? Steve's on CPC. that's
There
why.
was a motion made of increasing the 150 that we have already asked for to 175 in an attempt to get people together to get this project to the finish line.
So that's why there's a plus and a question mark is next to that $200,000, a little blurry. So hopefully that too can become 225 potentially. Again, CPC's been great and very supportive, and hopefully we can kind of get a little bit more out of them. We kind of keep asking, and they keep giving, which is great. The fundraising and Maynard Soccer's pledge is totaling about $25,000. Ideally, we'd like to keep that for maintenance or other amenities like netting around Fowler, which is something that's sorely needed, but it's there if we need it to kind of get this project to completion. So that's about 225 plus or minus. There's a number of other sources that we've been talking to quite regularly over the last year. The school, who's been great in terms of their support, and I understand the challenges the school has, but they've been talking about whether there's at least a little bit of something that they could put towards this project, towards their field. Been talking to the town with Andrew and Aaron about potentially having something earmarked. Again, additional fundraising, corporate sponsorships. Someone in our group suggested a potential capital stabilization request, which I don't have a good understanding of how that would go about, but it's on the list. And so at the end of the day, in order to potentially get what we need for Fowler and the irrigation, per the study, is about $180,000 to $220,000 is what we have to get to the finish line. And we've been talking to a number of people where we think we're kind of getting to a point where we can at least go to bid, because we should be able to get to that 260 mark, right? The 260 to 300, which is the bid for the field and the contingency, and we think we're pretty close to that, but obviously want to try to get as close as we can to the irrigation as well, so we can make this, a reality. So, any questions about the numbers?
Yeah, sure. The 150 is what you're thinking is the worst case because VHB gave you that number. But what you're saying is once you go out to bid, you'll be getting bids that might be under 150, but also could be over 100.
It could be. I mean, the one challenge with Fowler, it's a big field, right? So it's math. It's number of square feet times the dollars per to irrigate it. But yeah, that's kind of the thought process. Is it's an ad alternate in the sense that someone could come in and say, yeah, that bid, we can definitely do that for X amount of dollars, and we have it.
So Terrence, were you asking about the top line pieces, the main part of the quote? Because that's 250, right?
Just specific to the irrigation portion.
Oh, just
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
okay, I understand now.
So it's a marker we think VHB's
Right.
expertise says that's probably where it's going to
That
land.
marker was 150.
But
That's
we
exactly.
put it out to bid
Yeah,
at some point.
Could be
right?
less than that, yeah.
I don't know if I can go back.
And second question
Yes,
is, first of all, I mean, I know you guys do a fantastic job, so, I mean, this is great. I know it's all volunteer, and I know how much you guys are involved in it, so I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. And we probably, again, we've been really talking to all the organizations, and we felt like it made sense to come and talk to you guys because we haven't been here to kind of explain what we've been doing. So thank you for having us.
Have you approached anybody commercially yet? Companies in town, Acacia, Stratus?
Not yet.
Greg Hill, okay?
No.
Do
No,
you have-
so we have a list of people, and again, those that, there's businesses in town, and then there are those types of businesses, right? We have not, and our goal was to get to a point where, I mean, quite honestly, we were hoping to get to a point where we had the CPC funds at least to go to town meeting with, and that they approved it, and then our goal was, okay, let's do a rendering. We have a connection with somebody who has a business in the mill, who has a connection to Acacia, has a connection to Stratus, is friendly with Greg Hill. All those names have come up, in addition to people at Mill and Main and 129 Parker. We don't, so we think that we could probably piece together some corporate sponsorships or corporate donations. That's definitely on our list of things to do.
And the last question, you
Yeah.
had referenced the school was doing it. Well, I'm unfamiliar with what the school is actually providing in this. So if anybody wants to comment on that, because I don't remember seeing anything allocated for budget directly for the fields or in this year or last year or the year before that.
Sure. So about 8 or 12 weeks ago, Terrence, the Friends of Maynard Soccer and the group that's driving this initiative came and talked to us at a school committee. And we're far enough along in the process that they asked for a representative from our committee to sort of function as a liaison between our groups. So I volunteered to do that. So for the last couple of months, I've been attending the meetings. I've been in the design meetings with Aaron and their consulting crew and everything. And one of the things that we talked about as a school committee is similar to what we did with the playground project a few years ago. We have a fund set aside from our international student tuitions that we've used for one-time capital needs. You know, it's not a reoccurring source of funding. So when the group approached us and I got in contact and involved with the CPC process, CPC did ask the question of what can the schools bring to the table as well. So we have had multiple discussions at the school committee level. We unfortunately had to cancel our meeting last week because we didn't get a quorum, but on the 29th, I've asked that this be put on our agenda as an action item as well so that we can have a further discussion about it, figure out what, if any, we can contribute to the project and hopefully vote on it.
So you are looking to perhaps put some money aside for the fields?
We have had enough conversation with Michelle, who's our business manager, to understand that there might be some set aside for one-time capital type spending like this.
Gotcha. Thank you for the explanation.
No worries.
Appreciate it.
And Justin's been great. He's joined us over the last couple months, and it's been, you know, like I said, the one thing that I would like to say is that every organization that we've been dealing with, whether it's DPW, CPC, the school, anybody at the town we've come across has just been super helpful. We've tried to do this kind of the right way. We're trying to, you know, start from the ground up and really try to get everybody involved. And it's really been nice how everybody's come together, asked some really good questions, anyways, it's been a really good experience. A tiring one at times, but a good experience. So, you know, where do we want to go? So obviously we want to secure the money necessary to put the project out to bid and work with the town to see it to completion. And we want to try to do that as soon as possible. You know, we're selfish. You know, I know that Barry and I's daughters both are 8th graders and are soccer players, and so selfishly, you know, was probably why we got involved, because we want our kids to be on a really good surface. You know, we want to further enhance the Fowler Field complex. You know, like we talked about, netting. You know, team benches. You know, any kind of amenities, maybe stands. You know, just really make it a facility that, you know, we can be proud of. You know, just, you know, you go to other towns and not, you know, our size and our type, and, you know, the Clintons of the world, and they have really, really nice facilities, and we just want to kind of have, you know, a similar safe environment for our kids to play, and then work with town government to make sure that, you know, the progress and what we do is sustainable, and then remain an advocate for future projects and a fundraising arm for soccer in town. You know, we understand the timelines that are associated with it, and, you know, I think the big concern is that we don't want to be here another year from now saying, hey, we're almost at the finish line. You know, we're kind of almost at the finish line now. You know, so what we need, you know, is support, but also some guidance from you. Some support from, we've gotten support from Rain and Rec, of which we're members of, but, you know, the other members of Maynard Recreation believe in, you know, putting money towards field renovation. We, you know, maybe need to do a little bit more of that, of field renovation in this town. Our goal is hopefully to pass the vote from CPC on the 21st, which is tomorrow, maybe. Continue to work with school committee for their support and assistance, which has been great. Continue to work with FinCom to make sure we're aligned. Look to businesses for further funds, and then continue to work with the town and Aaron, you know, associated with MYS to help with what we've been doing for all along, which is lining fields and putting goals up and putting nets up, and really work with all of you, just kind of help us get to the finish line. So that's what I got. Any further questions or thoughts or anything like that, we're more than welcome.
Timing question. All things being equal, things go your way. September? Could it be ready, or are we talking next year?
You would be probably talking with start sometime in the fall for to have the field complete for the following year.
Hopefully.
And we would just squeeze wherever we had to. For a year, if we had to, I was talking to the athletic director, and we'd move our teams to different fields and just do what we had to get it done. Maybe talk to Sudbury, see if they can help us. We've helped them in the past.
Second question, not directly related, but what's the enrollment like for MYS?
Maynard Youth
What are
Soccer.
we doing we
Yeah,
growing,
so
we
so
shrinking?
Maynard Youth Soccer from a youth program is probably, in my opinion, it's probably a biased opinion because I've been involved quite a bit, is probably the largest youth organization in the town. I think our enrollment this spring is about 400 kids and volunteers, and that's per season. So each season, there's a fall season and a spring season. It's a full-time job. And that fall season, that doesn't include the high school program because they play school. So it's a little bit less, but usually K through 12, we're looking at somewhere in the ballpark of 400 kids and volunteers coaching and stuff
Any
like that.
trends on that? Is it trending up or down from when my kids were in it, or?
You know,
do we know?
it changes from grade to grade is kind of how it does. You'll have a small grade come through, and then you'll have an exceptionally large grade come through. And the overall numbers tend to stay the same, but it does change from year to year.
The reason I'm asking is just because we hear so often that there's all kinds of young families who want to move into town, right?
Yep.
But if they don't have the facilities to actually play soccer, maybe they're choosing something else, and that's what I know we've always had very strong representation since
Yeah.
my kids were in Tiger Club, so.
It's fairly steady. You hear the grousing and whatnot, at Tiger Cubs, they're playing at Fowl. And that's the thing, too. It's not just a high school program that's playing over there. Maynard Youth Soccer uses it for games. The Tiger Cub program, which is, uses it for, and the school uses it for recess as well. And again, it gets a lot of usage. It obviously is a very heavily used facility, and we're just trying to make it better.
Some of the earliest reasons we started doing this was just safety concerns. I've seen a number of players out there that have hit the turf and break a collarbone, break a wrist, something, and that's been happening for years. We actually had a company come in and do a compaction test on it, and it was, the compaction on the field was very similar to the parking lot.
If I may ask, separate question, I know we talked a little bit about approaching companies as sponsorships and things like that, but I know from work that I've done on historical projects and in the surrounding area, that there's oftentimes grants that can be available, especially that since you have 501c3 status, where, if it's to the benefit of the community and you can kind of show an education or community outreach piece, where you might end up getting into that. Some of the numbers it could be up to 25,000 that some organizations will offer. Has that been something?
It is something that we know is out there.
Yeah.
We are probably, and this is probably not the best answer, we're probably stretched a little thin.
Yeah.
And so we really haven't explored grants. We know, and we've talked about it like, hey, we know there's grants out there, let's try to explore it. We haven't gotten to the point of actually finding some and applying for some at this point.
Because ones that I have looked into in the past, I would say, given as far along as you are in terms of identified committed funds and the plan, it's something that would probably be looked favorably upon. Sometimes some grant makers want to see, the request for proposals has gone out, we've gotten bids back in this amount, and they kind of want to see it at that next phase. But I would just imagine that particularly, given the community piece of this, that it's not a single grade, that's the benefit of the entire community.
Right.
That would be another potential source of not insignificant sources of funding. I think even ones that, 25,000 might end up kicking 5K over or something like that.
That's
So-
great feedback, thank you.
Steve, quick question for you. As a member of the CPC, first off, I assume the funding allocation that that group is talking about would all come from the recreation bucket?
Yes.
Okay, there's no historic aspect of the...
No. In fact, we have one small project that's going down at the Glenwood Cemetery that's up for a proposal. And I felt that was possibly could have been in the historical bucket, and after a discussion, it was kind of agreed that it wouldn't. It would also come out. Because of the CPC buying the golf course.
That was sort of where I'm getting. Is there enough money to even...
Yeah, where we're going is about where we can get to. If they went to the additional 125 to make it 175 this pass around, that would leave us really tight. And the state's not giving us as much as we were before. The golf course is $122,000 out of that bucket every year. So that kind of wags the dog.
In terms of allocating funds, from the CPC, it seems like, in terms of the usage for the kids in the town and the families in the town.
Oh, I'm not
Fowler
questioning
Field-
the validity of using the funds. I'm looking for more funds within.
Right.
Yeah, no, I
Well-
knew you were, David, but I was just reinforcing
Yeah.
what I believe is the right usage of the CPC funds, which is to Fowler Field for all of the families. And I know you're a supporter of that.
Yeah.
So I'd also like to make to the point that where we have so limited fields in the town, I know a lot of times the perception is this is a school field. To everybody in the town, this is a town field. It's the biggest field complex we have in the town. We have the parking right there. It's easy for Tiger Cubs to go on out there. It's easy for parents to come, get their kids. It's really probably the most used field for what it is. And the conditions, I don't know, if you haven't been up there for a while, drive by and take a look. When we were in the drought the year before, it was nothing but you'd see dust coming up everywhere. The kids would leave and they're breathing it in the whole time they're out there.
Well aware of that.
Yes.
Can't go back to work after you visit the field.
Anything else?
No,
Thank
great
you so
job.
much for your time, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
So our request, though, is...
Yeah, what do you?
Yeah, what are we asking for?
We're kind of hoping that, we know we're in the plan for 100,000, and we'd really like to be in the plan for 150, so we could really narrow the gap on getting this done. I think if we got to the point where we were near a finish line, when we have that rendering and we're heading to the companies in the town, I think that it would be a doable number, and it'd be very, it would help us a lot in raising the last little bit to get it done.
And like I said, just I think, as I noted in the presentation, just your guidance as to how to get to there. I think that we're not as versed in some of these things, or probably more versed than I was 2 years ago. But really, how do we get to that number would be really helpful. So, that's not going to happen tonight, but really appreciate it.
I assume, and Andrew, you can chime in, but I assume that really the only bucket, if you want to call it that we would have that would be able to even consider would be free cash.
That's correct. So Steve Jones mentioned that it's in the plan. You haven't seen this yet formally. It's for discussion for later tonight. But we are recommending part of the free cash allocation for capital, and on that list for the capital is some money for the Fowler Field. But for the same reason the CPC meeting might be canceled tomorrow night, we don't know how much money we're going to have for free cash for several more weeks. We know how much the top number is. We don't know what the available to spend on things like capital will be until we have the snow number nailed down.
If we ask everybody to stay home and not go out, and we just decide not to plow for a couple days, can we
Open your
save some-
windows, turn on your heat, it'll help us all out.
Super.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Extra.
It's fine.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say the new screens would benefit from a larger font size on the presentations. And we'll be sure that our presenters know that in the future.
Those are new TVs?
We just stretched them out. We
Yeah,
had
they
this
look-
new
they look-
tool, and we just expanded the size of them a little bit.
They look like it provides a bigger
It does,
image,
yeah.
but I notice I'm closer, so, which
Yeah,
is bad for the TVs.
We moved your desk a little closer
Yeah.
to the screen. didn't we?
Right, one-day permit. The motion there that says, move to accept and approve a one-day special entertainment permit to use Memorial Park for summer music on the following dates: Friday, July 20th and 27th, from 5 PM until 10:30 PM, and on August 3rd, from 5 o'clock PM until 10:30 PM. Music will be from 6 PM until 9:30 with no rain dates.
The music would be 7 to 9:30.
Just reading what's in front of me.
I gave you the additional time for your setup and breakdown.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So. Anybody second that motion?
Second.
Okay.
So it's not a one-man band.
It is not a one-man band, no.
Okay. Anybody have any questions based on the paperwork and everything that Becky gave us, or?
This is the first time we're doing this, Mike? Have we?
We did this, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago on a Labor Day, where we just kind of set up and played, and it was a good time. Some people came out.
Okay.
So we thought, you know, a little free summer concert series would be fun.
All right. Right on.
And are all 3 dates going to be the same group?
Yeah. And we'll probably have like some of the other local musicians come and like maybe sing a couple songs or play on a couple songs, that sort of thing. But we're planning on doing, the first Friday we're gonna do summer songs, summer type songs. The second Friday we're planning on doing like jam band, Grateful Dead kind of songs. Then the third night, we wanna do hard rock, the Who, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, stuff like that. So, but we're practicing about 80 to 90 songs right now for 3 shows worth. We've got some good material. I'm pretty excited. It should be fun.
Is there a stage there?
Well, there will be a stage there in the summertime from the community band. So, and that's actually a nice stage too, because that's improved over the last couple of years.
One thing I'm thinking is it's Saturday, so you stand. It's not Wednesday night, right?
It's Friday, isn't it?
They're Friday nights
Fridays?
actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
Saturdays is the DPW cleanup. But even so, Friday nights, we may want to think about a police detail. Because you could get more people than you anticipate,
It's
especially
possible.
if the weather's nice and they're walking to go out to eat afterwards and people too close to the edge of that road there.
So I think it kind of comes down to promotion. I'm not planning on doing any promoting. The guys in the band are. We're really just doing it for fun. We'll put some stuff out on Facebook and send out some emails and that sort of thing. So usually when we do that, we get friends and family and that sort of thing, maybe 50, 60 people. But if people start hearing about it and they know it's going to be on a Friday night and the weather looks good, we could get, maybe 100, 110. Which, isn't a huge number, but...
You may want to pass a can around for the field fund, too.
We could always try. I'd be game.
Aaron, how much cleanup is it usually after like the Wednesday nights? Minimal? Okay. I assume it would be the same on a...
But that's not a rock band on Wednesday night.
Different crowd on a Friday, though. Okay.
Messier
All right.
crowd, is that what you're positing?
I don't know, what do we do if there is a mess?
So we would just have to plan it from
And
there.
if it rains on the Friday, there's no,
If it rains, there's no show. It's just too crazy to try and get all that equipment on stage and play if you're worrying about the rain and everything, because there's no shelter there. So
and there's no backup night.
no, there's no backup nights. It's either on or it's off for all 3 of the nights. And I was going to kind of clean up if there was like garbage and stuff afterwards. We'll walk around with a couple contractor bags and make sure it's tidy. We don't want to leave a mess either.
All right. Anybody else have any more questions?
Take requests?
You sure, Sonny, to me.
You have to be
It'd be ahead of time? You go get a press
You
release.
send them ahead of time. I've already got the set list down.
All right, so any other questions from anybody? No. And all those in favor?
All right, so we'll see you all there.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Here.
much.
I'll have your permit ready in the morning.
Thank you.
All right, number 8, one-day license. I'll read it. Say, move to accept and approve the one-day license to sell beer and wine hosted by Nicole Kaczorski, Bruce Davidson, Rebecca Norris Bell at Celia T's, 40 Summer Street, Maynard, on Saturday, March 31st, 2018, from 7 p.m. until 11 p.m. This event is a fundraising dance for Every Town for Gun Safety, Groovin' for Gun Sense, Tip Certified Richard Curtin, license number ODL18, that's Grooving for Gun Sense 331-18. Have a second.
Second.
What is license ODL 18?
It
Refer
stands for
to?
one-day liquor license.
Oh, okay. That's
2018.
That's our number? Okay, all right.
We just started using it.
I wasn't sure where it was from. I never saw those numbers before.
Acronyms.
Okay, all right. That's okay.
Stump the chair night.
No, I haven't seen that before. so-
I got a quick question, if you don't have something, Chris, to start.
Go ahead.
So explain to me what grooving for gun sense is. I'll be honest with you, out of the gate, it sounds like it's a statement versus it's a fundraiser. So I want to be sure I understand what exactly you're looking to accomplish here,
Sure,
what the group's background is, and what your hope is for it.
yeah, so it's a fundraiser to raise funds for the organization Every Town for Gun Safety. I don't know if you're
Never heard of
familiar with
it.
that is. So it's a bipartisan national organization that is working to reduce gun violence, and they do it by, they're trying to work to get guns out of the hands of domestic abusers, education on safe gun storage, trying to get the gun lobby have less influence in the White House and so on. So they sort of go at it from all angles, and they're not focused just on sort of high-profile mass shootings. And so, I was sort of moved by the shooting that happened in Florida and really felt like I wanted to do something to help, and, speaking to a lot of other friends in the community, and they were feeling the same way. So we figured, why not host a fundraiser? And we wanted it to feel sort of like a positive, upbeat community event. So we came up with this idea of sort of a dance party, and we called, so that the name of it is Groovin' for Gun Sense, so like groovin', dancing, with the mission towards, sensible legislation for guns. And so there's going to be a live band, and the funds that we're raising are through the ticket sales. So tickets are being sold downtown at Raspberry Beret, and they're available online. So through ticket sales, and then also we're going to have a raffle there, so people have donated raffle items.
So excuse me, what would the funds that you're the fundraiser, what would they be going towards?
To Every Town for Gun Safety, this organization.
Okay, and their primary goal is what they're using those funds for something, but what are they using the funds for?
They use it for
Lobbying.
yeah, exactly.
So is it education, is it lobbying, is it augmenting the law, or is it to try to change a law? You see
It's
what I'm-
all of those things. It's
Okay.
all of those things. So that's one of the things that sort of appeals to us about this organization, is that they sort of have a wide reach, so that they do a lot with education. Like I said, trying to educate gun owners on safe storage of guns, and then also, sort of recognizing the different ways that that gun violence is affecting Americans. So it's not just these sort of high-profile mass shootings. Actually, one of the largest causes of gun violence is domestic violence. So they're really working hard to try to pass legislation to close the loopholes in background checks, so that people who are convicted domestic abusers can't own guns.
Is there a local chapter or something that for?
There is, yeah. So there are sort of a number of them, and I'm blanking on the name of it. It's like Moms taking action for
Moms
gun.
Demand Action for
Yes,
Gun Sense.
yes. Thank you.
Against Illegal Guns is a national coalition. Then they have a Survivors Network for survivors of gun violence. So, I mean, it's a large national nonprofit working, as you said, across a multi-pronged agenda to gun education, gun safety, et cetera.
Right.
Thank you.
And these smaller branches, they don't accept donations, but that's why that's why we're going with Everytown for gun safety, because they're sort of large enough to accept donations. So that's our goal.
Thank you.
My question is regarding the event itself relative to assurance that I see in your application, no minors will be in attendance. Will there be a police detail?
We did contact the police and we told them about the event, and they said that they didn't believe there was a need to have a detail, but that they would be sort of aware of it and circling around.
So will somebody be checking IDs at the door?
Yes, for some, we're going to have 2 people collecting tickets and.
I mean, it's a private location, so I get the. I really don't have a problem. It's just I'm just curious.
Yeah.
But you'd still need to show a form of identification at the bar.
At the
right?
ar, yeah.
So-
Right.
That's part of the tips requirement
It
from
says in the
the.
application, no minors will be in attendance.
Yeah. It's a 21, it's tagged as a 21 plus event.
Yes,
So it's,
okay.
Okay. Melissa, any questions? Anybody else? Okay, and you guys are insuring this?
Yep.
Okay. All right. No one has any other questions? All right, all those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck, have fun.
Available tomorrow for
Okay,
pickup.
thank you.
Anybody object to taking 9 and 10 out of order?
Nope.
Okay, discussion with the school committee budget.
Oh, I thought you were gonna bring them forward, so we could actually get them done.
Who?
You're asking if we'll actually bump the school committee up, is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah, move them into the next thing. Switch 9 and 10. So you guys are 10, so now you're 9.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thought you were gonna bump us to the end.
That's what I'm saying, that's what I thought you were saying.
I might have wanted to.
I knew it was.
Yeah. So, thank you for having us back. A comment was made in the last couple of weeks that last year you guys were disappointed that you received some information about budget and that late in the game, too late to make it constructive or, more of a proactive decision. So here we are again. We may be back again. We did hear from Becky that the deadline for the warrant to be printed, I guess, is April 13th, I think you said, right?
April 6th is the deadline for articles.
Okay, that's good to know. I thought it was the 13th, but anyway, so we did meet after we left from our meeting with the Selectmen a couple of weeks ago. We went and met with the Finance Committee, and basically just gave them much of the same information that we had given you about this year's budget, school budget, or 2019. And they made a comment that when we were here, we had asked about the health insurance premium, and I think Kevin Sweet, in his official report, had said that there was 10% being set aside for the premium increase. And when we went to the Finance Committee, they did say that the number had come in, and it was actually 5.6% increase.
We actually discussed it that night at the meeting. I think y'all had left.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
all
but-
right, maybe,
you brought it
yeah,
up.
so that was great. So the thought process is that there's an additional 4.4% that had been budgeted for that is available now. I could be fresh and say that since we've been told in the past that the school budget or the school personnel represents 80%, that we might ask for 80% of that 4.4%. But being team players, we were wondering if we might be able to entertain receiving 60% of that differential, the 4.4%. I don't even know what it correlates to as far as dollars go, but for the same reason that we have been urging you to see if there were any additional funds that might be able to be directed to the school department. Just giving you one example, in this past, I guess it was last week, we found out that there is another student special needs student that we're going to be responsible for next year to the tune of $100,000 that we didn't know about two weeks ago when we met with you.
So, just let me ask
Sure.
one question. If we give you $100,000 for this one student, when are you gonna spend that money?
When are we going to spend it?
Because the money that we gave you last year, you still haven't spent. It was a dire need last minute in this room and in private conversations, and that money still hasn't been spent. So when will that 100 be spent?
So Michelle's not here to explain the process, but I think she has explained it before with Mike Guzzo, and they understand that she tries to use up other funds before we use those at the very last moment.
That's a bad answer. That's a bad answer, Bob, because you guys come in, you came in last year, and you held up a piece of paper in this room, and you said, this is our bill for $257,000. We owe this now.
Yeah.
We need this money now, right?
I don't think we said we need it now.
The
We said,
answer-
when you pay
No, no.
tuition, do you
No,
pay
no.
tuition all at once at the beginning of the year
We
for
paid all
student and
once.
out-of-district
I pay my
placement?
tuition all at
Maybe,
once.
maybe.
It's
I
due
don't know.
before the semester starts or my child doesn't go to school.
So-
But you guys brought a piece of paper in last year, right? And said, we need this now. So we sat in a room and came up with a solution and provided the money, and it's still sitting there. So how does that equate to now?
I know that Mike and Michelle, who I don't think either are here, are in agreement in how Michelle spends which pots of money and when. And they've had that conversation because that was asked a little while ago.
Okay.
And they are in agreement in how they spend the money because right up to the very end, oftentimes there are transactions made at the very end of the year. There's usually a little bit left that goes back to the town, although we've now created this new fund. We're in the process of creating that revolving fund for special ed because it is such a growing need.
You haven't done that yet.
I know, we're in the process.
We can't fund it if we don't have money to fund it.
But
we want
anyway,
to.
so the reality is that Mike and Michelle are on the same page as to when she spends which money. The bottom line is that we will be spending, there won't be a lot of extra money at the end of the year. That's the bottom line.
I had seen it might have been the report when I went onto the website to find out what the agenda was tonight, and I forget where I read it, that there was a report the end of December saying that the town side had spent 53% of their full budget. So again, you guys don't spend 100% on day one either,
Well,
and that's
as of-
basically
as
what
of-
we're
as of-
talking
As
about.
of December, we were only 50% through our year.
Right, but we're having the same
but
conversation.
But the difference being, that you guys presented in this room, in this very room, the fact that we have a surprise bill that is due now. We need the money right away to pay this bill.
We didn't say right away. We said we have a
Okay.
bill that we're going to have to pay.
Let's
for the next
rerun
year.
the tapes. Because
Sure.
I guarantee you that it was,
Yeah.
we need this now, and we had a row of parents in the room, rows and rows of parents, and teachers and professionals, tears in their eyes, crying with a stream to the microphone. I then went to the next school committee meeting for the same thing, right? Sat through 2 or 3 of those things, because it was now. We need it now, because we have to pay the special ed bill that popped up as a surprise. It wasn't, we need it for next July, it was, we need it for now.
Was we need it as part of our budget to pay our bills for the next year.
And
We can agree to
for it,
disagree,
Chris.
but it was not a discussion, and there was nobody in this room that had any inkling or any suspicion that that was gonna be money that sat somewhere for a year, period. There's no question about that in my mind.
I think the inference was that money was needed now, and that's how we undertook going after the money. So I would have to second what the chairman said. I'm slightly confused. I was reading something earlier about, sound financial practices and, the school committee returning money to the town every year, and I'm thinking, if we're budgeting appropriately, why is there a surplus that you have to, so if we're cutting jobs, any jobs, right? And we're cutting any programs, why are we returning a surplus of cash? And I'm not saying this to be a wise guy, I'm actually legitimately asking you a question. Why did we return $450,000 over the last 6 years that we budgeted for the schools?
So I believe Pete has answered that question in the past when he was here, and that it's usually been less than 1% of our budget. And the idea is, hopefully you want us to be cost conscious and try to save money where we can. And in addition, every year you get about $400,000 to $600,000 combined from all of the departments. So the police, the fire, they're all as frugal as they can be. They spend at the end of the year, there's some amount of money, but I remember, Pete, there was only 1 year that it was large, but every year it was always below 1%, and usually below 0.5% of our budget.
Well, regardless of whether it's below 0.5% or not, I'm still trying to get this rounded in my head. Is you ask for money,
Yep.
we give you budget money, it's never enough, but you return money at the end of the year. That's what I'm having a difficult time fathoming.
It's $540,000 over the past 5 years, 6 years. It's
So
a lot of
that's
money.
why are we spending it on the jobs we cut? We cut administrative staff last year. We've cut programs. That's what I'm trying to understand.
When you budget for your household, just asking this question, aren't there some things you budget for and you don't know exactly what they're going to come in at? And then they come in. I'm like, when we're talking about FTEs, right?
But if I had the money, Mary, I wouldn't cut that out of my household, is what I'm saying.
Right, but think about how immense and huge the school's budget is and how many different categories. And if you're looking at the year, say we think we're going to spend X amount of money on paper, right? And the paper doesn't end up costing as much. There's a lot of little things like that that add up. But when we're looking at a head count, if you're talking about FTEs and the amount of money you spend on somebody's position, that's a known factor, right? So there's a lot of unknowns, and then there are the knowns. So I think that I would say that they do the best that they can.
I'm not saying anybody's not doing the best they can, but it just seems a little bit irrational in a way that I'm looking at the chart where there's money been returned every year for 6 years.
It would be interesting to find out what happens in other towns and if other school districts are doing that same thing. I don't know the answer to that.
And on top of that,
but
we budgeted we went and got an extra $275,000 last year based on a need. So again, and it wasn't spent for what we were told it was going to be spent for. So that's why we're having a hard time trying to figure out how to address this. That's all. No one's trying to be obstinate about it. It's really hard to fathom sometimes. And again, you're coming, and your first comment from the superintendent is Michelle's not here, but Michelle and Mike are in cahoot. They're in communication with one another, but they don't make the decisions for the town. We do, and you do, right? And you do, and you do. So
I have a question.
if we're going to have a discussion about budgets, why wouldn't either of them be here?
So I have a question that maybe you could answer.
No. I asked Mary, if you're gonna hand anything out, we need it up front. I asked that clearly.
I'll just ask you then.
I asked if there's anything coming to us for paperwork, could we have it up front so we know what it is and know
Okay,
what's
I'll just
coming?
ask then. What was the total town employee count for 2017?
I have no idea.
No idea at all.
It's 108 full-time equivalents, and then we have part-timers. That number changes every time. We had a firefighter that quit last week. We hire one next week, that sort of thing. But these numbers that Mary is trying to pass out here have been talked about in some of your subcommittee meetings.
With the double counting.
And there's a lot of double counting because the original numbers were looking at everybody in the payroll in a tax year, which is not representative of
It
actual
depends on where the
head
numbers
count.
come from. Because
That's right.
the way it was explained to us at the budget subcommittee.
I was at that.
The National Labor Board or something like that, where the numbers came from.
They count
And
names
they
on the
count-
payroll.
If somebody comes in and picks up a paycheck today, and then somebody else is a part-timer that picks up the same paycheck for the same job as a part-timer, that counts twice. Or if somebody leaves, they get counted, and then their replacement gets counted. So it's double counting all over the place.
The
But-
full-time equivalent head count number is the one that we usually use when we want to compare apples to apples. And the town's head count number hasn't changed dramatically in 6 or 8 years. I've been here 4 going on 5 years, and it's always been about 108 FTEs, and then things like summer hires or library pages, which don't even hit the radar screen as for full-time equivalency because there's such a small number of hours. But to David's point, they count as a head when you look at how many people worked here, how many people got a tax document on January 31st. That's that higher number. That's 1-to-1 as opposed to an FTE number.
Well, so one of the concerns, though, has been when we've been giving those numbers to FinCom for their document, they haven't been apple to apple. So that's why we start collecting this data, because we have transient employees too. We have double counts too. So, the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a count that everybody has to follow the same process. In fact, I believe it was Mike Sullivan who asked us to really be astute about hiring more part-time employees. So it goes back pretty far, like 4 years. So we have a significant number of part-time employees, and it makes it harder for us to do our job. Sometimes we'll hire a .8 Spanish teacher, or a .8 or a .6. So our full-time FTEs, we have the same problem. So this was just a data point that would be similar, because
So I guess what I'm curious about is, so Mary, you're bringing up the question of what are the number of full-time employees in the town? What is the point behind the question?
What's behind it is I feel like the last time we came here, I felt the same way. I feel like we are subject to a degree of scrutiny with regards to our budget that I'm not sure the rest of town departments are subject to.
Well, I think...
And there are questions that we've asked at the joint meetings that still haven't been answered. So I would love to know, for example, at the joint meeting we had with FinCom, where Bob McCarthy went through the PowerPoint presentation, and we saw how percentages have changed of what we're spending on different things. We've still never gotten an answer on why it appears from that on the town government side and DPW, that those numbers have increased.
Did you get anything when you talked, when you went to FinCom on that? Because my recollection when we had that conversation as a subcommittee was that FinCom was going to go back and ask Bob to clarify that and provide data.
Not really.
Okay, so I mean, just as a point of reference, I mean, I think that there's every question that has come up that we have been able to answer, we have diligently gone back and answered it. So, the discussion around the town employees and the head count, we dove into that deeply, went through it position by position to kind of explain where those numbers were. So when it comes to looking at level of insight to town budgets, Kevin we shared the discussion, the instruction points that went out to all of the town department heads. Kevin, and then when he left, transition to Andrew, we have running lists of all the things that were cut. We asked all the departments to maintain lists of what they didn't ask for based on what the budget guidance was, what their wish list was if money was to come back in. So all of that has been done. It's done through the town administrator, the acting town administrator, but it was done with the same degree of, we don't have money, manage it to this, what are you coming back with and how are we doing that? Which is how we were able to maintain the growth as minimal as it was, given our budget picture. So, yeah, it's not the same degree of public discourse, which the schools are subject to, because a lot of that's run under the aegis and the direction of the town administrator. But it does happen. Does take place, and it has been the subject of every Board of Selectmen meeting that we've had since after the start of the year.
So I guess I would just go back to the original request, which is pretty straightforward. There seems to be an additional 4.4% health insurance premium that, to be fair, we should be able to be part of that. Everything else is just is off track.
I wouldn't say no to that because we haven't received all that information yet ourselves, number one.
According to the finance committee,
when I say we, I mean the 5 people sitting here.
Oh, I see, okay.
Okay,
Right.
so
But I thought,
we haven't
say,
gotten
Cheryl,
that
that
information yet. But the funny thing about that particular expense and that particular cost, and some of those other, what we call accommodated costs, that you guys never want to talk about them. You never want to talk about them.
in what regard?
Durati doesn't want to talk about them. Michelle doesn't like to talk about them, but when they're going to benefit you, you want to talk about them. It's just a comment, because I've been through this for 5 years now, and there's been discussions about the accommodated costs where no one wants to talk about the accommodated costs, and people want to, turn their heads and look the other way. But when the money comes back through an accommodated cost, everybody wants to say yes. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying it's before we even know about it, you guys are coming looking for money that when it's time to say, if people suggest it might be counted towards the school budget, when we start talking at town meeting and stuff about the true percentages of where the town money goes, people get kind of, I mean, you can say whatever you want, but this is true, that people kind of don't want to really account for those accommodated costs when we're sitting there talking about them publicly.
I feel like,
Can I just respond
Yes,
real
you
quick?
can.
And the response is that, I remember Vic sitting right over there saying, what about accommodated costs? And I remember Michelle saying, okay, our next budget book, we're going to make sure we have a pie chart that talks about accommodated costs. She actually had a very public discussion with the Board of Selectmen about it. So unfortunately, Michelle is learning a new student information system, so she can't be here tonight, and I'm not sure where Mike is. But the bottom line is, we have talked about accommodated costs, because actually, Michelle found out that they weren't calculated quite correctly. And so she would love to talk to you about that at some point. I'm certain about that. Again, but I know that she talked about it, and not only did we talk about it 2 years ago, she added it to our budget book, because every year our budget book is more and more transparent. We're really doing the best to share information with you. And, and that's what I think, unfortunately, Mary just left because she feels like she's been trying to share information with you and she just left frustrated.
Can I ask a?
I'm frustrated too, because every time we leave this room and we think we have made a statement and come to an agreement and had some sort of discussion that was beneficial to both sides, I see in different places and different things that the selectman did this, the selectman said that, and then I get, different follow-ups to these things. And I got them, I'll print the emails right here. They're right here in this machine in front of me. But, that this didn't happen, that didn't happen. That's not the case.
Can you share?
Yeah, I can share.
Mary, I'd be interested in knowing where you found out about the 4.4% surplus, because this is
From
the
the
first.
Finance
Last Monday
Committee,
night.
last Monday.
Last Monday night, we met with the
The
FinCom.
original,
Recommend we come back.
right.
So they met with the FinCom and got information that we haven't even had yet.
That's right, and the information that Mary presented is not accurate, but it's in the ballpark. But we haven't presented it publicly because you haven't seen it. It certainly is readily available. We've been talking about it internally. We just haven't been talking about it in a public session. At the last meeting, I made this very statement. We had the number, February 28th, it was given to us. We hadn't run it through the accounting yet to say what the impact is. It's actually on our agenda for later discussion. But Mary's numbers are off by about a full %.
Well, it's anything.
The budget amount was a little lower than you stated, and the actual rate increase a little higher than you stated. So the savings is there, but it's not 4.5, it's
Well, the
about 3.5.
10% came from the report that
Understood.
Karen had done. So
Understood. I'm not
Regardless of
doubting what you're
the-
saying, it's just,
Yeah.
the actual number is about 3.6%.
I guess my question would be kind of switching gears entirely from this is, I would love to tell you that by saving 4.4%, we've magically opened up $2.5 million in the budget and
Right,
it's Christmas for
right.
everyone. Obviously, that's not the case. So moving kind of past that, and I think touching on the spirit of one of the questions that was asked earlier, is there, and I don't have your last budget book with me tonight, but, is there a list of things that would be on your kind of ask list of a discrete, knowing that this is free cash, so it's only a one-time thing, it can't be put towards, an overarching budget, or, we're not looking at a significant amount of money. It's not like and it's a free cash allotment that we can't necessarily count on for the next year. Do you have a sense of what your top 3 priorities would be, or at what price point?
So it's in our case, because we presented a level service budget
Mhm.
based on contractual obligations
Yep.
and the things that were asked of us. It's a matter of what we wouldn't cut, so class sizes won't get larger at the elementary
Mhm.
school. Those are the type of things that
Can't
that
get
we
overly
would have to
specific.
look at.
So once you have a figure, would you then basically put that figure in through to say, okay, well, gee, I'm just hypothetically, if we're talking about $15,000 versus if we're talking $50,000 versus we're talking $150,000, that we can kind of because again, we're not going to be talking at such a significant scale on the one hand, but on the other hand, everything is significant.
So the question would be, do we make class sizes larger at the elementary level and cut one position? Do we consider our coaching positions and the need for math coaches to improve math scores, or do we eliminate that? Do we consider paraprofessionals? We have kindergarten paraprofessionals. Those are one of the few paraprofessionals that aren't mandated. And yet when we've had to cut them, parents come out because they're little kids. So those are the types of things, as you were asking, that, the levels of reductions that would have to be considered, that are annually considered pretty much.
From a dollar figure, Ms. Steele, the difference between what the town administrator before me presented on February 10th and the school's request is about $300,000.
That's
So
pretty
presumably
significant.
that's what they're looking for.
Portion of it.
Well, but that's
Yeah, and I
that's
guess,
the
and I'm just,
delta.
and because we
I
know
see.
it's not that
Oh,
number,
sorry.
I guess that's
That's
what I'm,
that's what they're looking to
374.
avoid cutting.
right. And I guess I'm knowing that we are, assuming that we're unlikely to find
There's far less than that available.
exactly. So that's kind of where I was going with that. I've read ahead on the agenda, Andrew.
Understood. If I could, I make one more statement.
Please.
Mary Branley suggested that the correct or the possible allocation of new available funds might be split proportionately to the way the rest of the budget is split. Is that a fair way of summarizing that? But on February 10th, we announced that we were providing 100% of the savings we received from the Assabet budget to the schools. And I think this goes to the chairman's comments about accommodated costs. We treated the Assabet money, they budgeted at a high number, just before the budget meeting, they came in and said, here's your real number, and it's quite a bit lower. And the town didn't look for any of that for the significant cuts that we made on the town side to balance our budget. We said, no, that's education money, that's where it belongs. The money that Mary's talking about tonight all came from the health insurance budget, all because our health insurance number came in lower. The health insurance number pays for health insurance for all town employees, including the schools. But if that number had come in higher than budgeted, I don't know that we would or would not be asking the schools for an additional cut to pay that bill, but that has happened in the past. We've come in higher than budgeted, and the town has found a way to manage it. So, I mean, that's the other side of the coin. I'm not advocating one way or the other, but I want to be fair about what's happened recently to newfound money. It was left with the schools. And now this newfound money essentially is in a town budget. Does it stay there? That's up to the selectmen.
So the conversation kind of got off to a little bit of a contentious start. But in the context of the meetings that we had together last year, we received message and guidance from your board loud and clear that we needed to be fierce advocates, that we needed to advertise better, we needed to be more transparent. So when we received some information, whether we should have or we shouldn't have, last Monday night, in that process, our budget subcommittee decided to come in and make the ask, because that's what we need to do for the students of Maynard. And I do want to reiterate that, you know, Mary is a real estate agent. The first thing that a family thinks about when they're considering moving to Maynard is what is the state of the schools. It's our flagship. 5 years I've been through this budget cycle. 5 years it's been less than level service. So Cheryl, you asked what our process is. We go through the process, we go through the budget season, the number comes up to what we need.
Oh, no, I wasn't asking about this process. I'm
Sure.
deeply familiar with the extent and rigor that y'all put into the budget process itself. My question was more, if there was a hypothetical nugget of money found, what would be the process
Sure.
through which you would identify
So
that,
was
which I now
actually-
understand.
Sorry, that was the direction I was actually kind of going.
Okay.
We realized what the difference is between the real number and the number that we're given. And then we go from what is the least impact that we can pull out
Yeah,
of
no, I
that
get
to
it.
make the budget balance. So, I mean, the reality is if it's 15, if it's 50, if it's 75, those are real dollars. We can turn around and spend that on FTEs that benefit our students. We've been in this yin-yang, teeter-totter situation where one year we cut a school adjustment counselor. The next year we have butts in the seats that are screaming, we need to bring back the school adjustment counselor. So we bring back the school adjustment counselor. We're just looking, you know, to do everything that we can to provide some projectability, some predictability, some consistency. You know, one of the unintended circumstances of riding this budget roller coaster is we have a large percentage of our teachers every year that are looking for jobs out of district because there's not job protection there if you're new to the teaching ranks. So whether we end up cutting the position or we don't, we still have a pretty good attrition because of the fear of them not having a job the following year.
And the only thing I would add to that, and I'm sure everyone in this room has read it, you know, the coverage and ongoing coverage that's happening at the state level with Brockton and Worcester and the lawsuit, because I think the highest degree of variability and lack of predictability in your budget is something that has nothing to do with anyone who's seated in this room right now, where you have any single new person coming into our community can, through that one person, significantly impact the budget. And, you know, clearly we're not alone in this. And so, I mean, just to the point that, I mean, even with everyone trying to work as you know, coordinated as we can be, as transparently as we can be, and with the highest degree of rigor of planning as we can be, we're still subject to a level of unpredictability at the state level that is just crippling.
Yeah, we talked about this briefly before our meeting, and I was commenting on, and I think we all agreed, that you could have, the article that was in the Globe on Sunday, you could have replaced Maynard with Brockton, and it was the same story. And so it's not just us. But I want to get back to the main issue that Mary brought up at the outset. I don't think it's an awful suggestion. I don't think it's an outrageous suggestion. I think it's something that I have not looked ahead on the agenda, so I don't know what the numbers are. But I'm a bit disappointed that we had the type of you know, it's healthy in some degrees, but it's not, because it's not the way we need to go about doing our budget and moving forward. So I'm hopeful that we can have a reasonable discussion about what is there and what we might be able to do. And, you know, it's,
And David, I agree with you 100%. One of the reasons that I tried to bring it back to the central question at hand, reframe the conversation a little bit, the way that I did is the budget is not my main focus. You know, I take negotiations and a number of other things that come along with the responsibility of being the chair this year. So Mary taking the point, you know, because that's what they're spending all their time and energy on. But I do want to reiterate how much I appreciate the progress that our boards have made over the last 12 to 18 months as far as spending as much time in rooms together as we have. Sometimes it's been less than ideal circumstances, but the mere fact that we're sort of bucking the historical trend that is going on in this town and getting the different constituencies, the different groups together, I think to have functional dialogue like this is a good thing. And you're absolutely right, we're not always going to agree. The tone might not always be the best, the messaging might not always be the best, but I do want to just reiterate the intent is we're trying to come with the best interest of our students at heart, so.
And just if I could just share, I was at the town meeting, it was before I was on school committee last spring, and the uncomfortable situation of having the additional $275,000 that was needed, and the finance committee feeling understandably that it was brought on very, very late. That's what we're trying to prevent. We hear new information, we receive new information, so the hope is that we can just bring it forward and just have a constructive conversation.
I think that's where my frustration is, not with your ask specifically, but the fact that you have this new information, the finance committee has it, and we haven't been briefed on it
Sorry
at all.
about that.
Other than, it's not your fault. I mean, I think this goes back to initial conversations that we had earlier this year about finance committee not communicating with us on a regular basis, like when they had open seats and filled them, and we didn't know about it till like 2 months after they filled those positions on their own board. I mean, I think finance committee needs to keep us briefed, especially in budget season, especially on such a big issue. If they knew the school committee was coming and was seeking part of this money, I don't understand why no one even sent us a memo or a heads up that this money was there and that there were discussions happening.
If I can, Melissa, though, I mean, we knew at the end of our last meeting that the projections had come back in and that there was I think even you said in your comments, Andrew, that was probably about a 4% less, but we hadn't yet, you ballparked it out at our last Board of Selectmen meeting. So we knew that we were going to have some savings coming back into the budget. So I don't know that I'm that worked up about the fact that just due to the sequencing of meetings that finance was able to say, okay, because it sounds like, whether or not, I mean, the fact that they gave you numbers, it's 6 1 half dozen the other, because we had the numbers as well in our pre-reads for the meeting. I think it's just a matter of, that doesn't bother me as much. I don't think that they were necessarily it's not like they had
It's not like they were trying
inappropriate
to-
access to
right.
information, but
No, it's
It might not be inappropriate access, but it takes things in a direction where you add contentiousness to it.
I think the tone of
Someone's
tonight
coming for
could
an
have started
ask
a
of
little
certain
bit
percentage
differently.
of money that some of us haven't even had so
We
yes,
haven't
we
yet
have
had the
documentation here. It's a dollar
conversation.
figure, right? We don't even really know what that translates to. So
And we
I don't
don't-
begrudge you asking for it. I would do the same thing.
I don't even know what the dollar amount is.
I still have a lingering question is, I'm not 100% satisfied that you guys know what you're doing with your money if you're returning money year after year. And you can say all you want, Dr. Girardi, about Michelle and Mike have it all, they understand what they're doing. Anytime I see a spreadsheet and there's surplus money being returned, it tells me that either we're over budgeting or we're not putting that money to someplace that we're cutting. I'm taking simple logic here, right? So I have no problem with you guys asking for more money, and it may even be the right thing to do. I don't know what the number of the money is right now. But I do think that, to kind of glance off on the return of money 6 years in a row is a little bit, that's troubling for me.
I just want to add, though, that every year in the town book, the town budget book, it shows all of the departments and how much they return back that goes into free cash.
But not every department, Dr. Girardi, is coming to us with a dire straits and a plea. The town administrator sets their budget for them, and they live with it. And I'm not saying the school shouldn't come to us and ask for that, but we try to do our best to give you the extra money if it's there. Last year's a good example, as the chairman talked about. But if there's money being returned and we have the ability to spend that money when it's out there, I just can't see the logic for why we're not spending it. That's all. I'm not saying you shouldn't return the money if that's the law, But maybe we need to do a better job of making sure that money's applied after you ask for it, that's all.
I mean, it's, so after sitting through several school committee meetings and listening to these concerns, right, about these different things, and listening to mothers of, special needs students, students that don't have special needs, the whole gamut, and teachers, and how many teachers call me at my house, screaming at me in my house because of what we're doing, and we need this, we need that. I'm fine with that. But, I didn't stay up till midnight the night before town meeting. I didn't go there an hour early to meet with town council and Kevin Sweet and, the finance committee, and put together this plan to get $275,000 to the school because somebody didn't lead me to believe that it was a dire need now, right? I mean, that's what it was. It was someone had a piece of paper and brought me the piece of paper, which I don't have, obviously, but I don't save that piece of paper, but they brought us a piece of paper and said, here's our number, here's what we owe. So we gave it was actually 257, we rounded it up to 275, but it was a now need. And it's not, I'm not, look, I understand the budget process and all that stuff, but it's disconcerting sitting here because, you see parents sitting in the audience at different places and their kids, we talked about potentially music programs, other things, paras, different types of things that we know as a group, and you guys unfortunately know, we all know as a larger group that's been trying to solve this problem for years, that those people went home. They had to find other jobs or found no jobs, yet at the end of the year, there's enough money coming back to us to have covered their pay. I understand the issue, right? And I understand what you're saying, Bob, and I'm not gonna argue with you and tell you that that's wrong at all. I'm just saying, when you sit through that part of the process, like I did for the first time last year on several different nights and listened to it, I had literally people call me at my house and, approach me at different places, and usually people don't. And talking about those things, and then to go through the process, and then see, whatever the amount says, oh, sure, that lady went home, or this gentleman went home, or that, 0.8 of a teacher wasn't brought back last year, but then you see that the money gets turned back, whether it's you or any other department that's turning it back, it kind of sucks to see it come back that way, when if that money that got turned back was, maybe could have kept that position, maybe could have kept that class, or maybe could have kept those things if people come in and then, I'm not saying tugging in the heartstrings in a negative way, but coming in, making those pleas to save these things. It's hard to accept when you see those other things come back at the end of the year. That's all I'm saying.
I can give you a couple of explanations. One, Michelle just texted me, and the money, the 275, was going towards out-of-district placements. Out-of-district placements are funded through general funds as well as circuit breaker funds, and the projection was so large they were going to need it. She did say she's sending me an email about how she and Mike are working on the transaction of using that money up now, because they're at the point, because they have, I want to say $900,000 of general funds to spend first, and we've had that discussion before they got to the 275, because ultimately if we didn't spend the 275, maybe we didn't get as many move-ins in, maybe we could have given that back.
Right.
And the other thing I will say is, having worked in many districts, what happens is at the end of the year in most of the big districts, they say, oh, we still have 0.5% less, buy as much paper as you can, buy as much pencils and all these stuff, and then they give back the town zero. And I think that we're getting criticized for Pete being a little too honest, because Pete would say, if I save money on paper this year, I'm going to give it back to the town.
What did I tell you
And I
today?
think all the departments do that.
I told him today, I said, at least they're honest and they give us some money back.
Thank you.
Right.
We had that discussion
Yeah,
earlier
no, I
today.
appreciate that.
I appreciate that. I get that. But I'm not saying, if we came upon whatever amount of money, I'm more than happy to send it to the schools. I don't have a problem with that. It's just, the process has to be the process, and we have to be true to the things we discuss in these rooms and we discuss in these smaller meetings. And I don't think that happened necessarily in some respects. That's my opinion, and that's,
I wouldn't use the word honest.
but I'm not saying dishonest. It's just, we need to be true to the process that we talk about, and I don't think that we necessarily were true to the entire process. And I was supposed to have him sit with Michelle and talk about these things, so I had a better understanding, but I got sick and she went away, so we didn't get together to talk about them. But I had made that attempt, but so I understood these things better, because I have had that question and I brought it up a few times. So I've had an appointment with her, but I was sick and she was going away the 19th or something, so I'll see her when she gets back, but,
Well, we appreciate that.
as far as that goes, feeling bad for the FinCom, because they were surprised. We were all surprised, and we were surprised with, 8 or 10 days to go, and that's the solution we came up with the day of the, we had a special selectmen meeting the night before, on a Monday, right? And then we had the next meeting, and that's when that came up, but.
Mr. Chairman, couple of quick points. First of all, I don't know where the FinCom got their number. I'm guessing that from the statements made 2 weeks ago, they did some back-of-the-envelope extrapolation. But the health insurance number cannot be modified by the rate change because, for instance, the rate change only affects the active employee health insurance. That's the majority of the health insurance, but it's not all of it. Over $1 million of our health insurance goes to retirees. That rate change has no impact on that budget. So this is why 2 weeks ago I said, we need to do some accounting to figure out where we're at before we say, here's what we have to spend. But if anybody took that rate change delta 3.5 something percent and multiplied it by the entire health insurance budget, they might have come up with a number they thought was available. If you looked at the packet over the weekend, you saw the number that I thought was available. Yesterday, Cheryl Kane, the town treasurer, the town accountant, and I met, and that number's actually gone up by like $10,000 because we keep looking at the numbers, fine-tuning them, making sure we have them right. So tonight's number is a couple $1,000s different than the weekend number. The point is, whatever FinCom is dealing with was probably done with someone's back-of-the-envelope understanding of things and not the level of detail that I'd be comfortable talking about publicly.
And I think, again, their recommendation holds, right?
Sure.
The recommendation that they offered to the school committee at their meeting last week was the right one. Hey, their savings have been found. It's worth making sure that your tin cup stays on the top of that.
And again, we don't even know what the dollars are. We were just given a percent. It could be $50. It was more a percentage. So we're just here, again, just to be in front of your face and do it the right way.
One other point I'd like to clarify.
It's always a pleasure to have you, but you're not going to be happy because it's not that much money, but.
Well, I'm sorry that Mary decided to leave out here frustrated. She's not the only one that's frustrated. So I can totally understand why she'd be frustrated. But the record shows every year we've tried to find more and more money for the schools. It's not, and I think part of if we had to put personal bias out there, it would probably be like some of us feel like we're getting picked on, even though because the people out there hear the negative, but they don't hear how hard everyone's working to try to find a solution. Right? All they hear about is the final number, and sometimes the final number is not right. So that's, I think personally that bothers some of us as well too. But as a board, for the 3 years I've been here, every year we've tried to find more money for the schools. We understand how important it is, but there's a number of departments in town that have also been cut every single year. All right, so
And
we're
again,
trying.
we do feel, and I guess I'll speak for myself too, but I know Mary does, that there is a heck of a lot more scrutiny put on the schools. Now, part of it's because it's such a huge piece of the budget, we understand that, but there is definitely a sense that we are definitely put through the ringer more than the other departments are, that there's not the same. When I was on school committee the last time, I think there were like 4 budget items, and that was it, and it's like, whatever. And now it's, I said, it's like how many pens we buy. It's like that level of scrutiny, and we just don't feel, and maybe it's because we don't see it. Maybe we could ask for the same information. We should be asking for the same information from the other departments, just to make sure that we're all on the same playing field.
We're not scrutinized. I don't think we scrutinize it. We don't scrutinize to that level.
Oh, doing it tonight.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm not doing it tonight.
I'd like to make one more point of clarification. The conversation between the superintendent and Selectman Donovan, I think it's very relevant to this. First of all, the free cash numbers are generated, the vast majority of that revenue isn't because the school returned some money. It's because of one-time revenues coming into the town that are not appropriated by town meeting in May of each year. So a lot of it's tax title, for instance. We got over $1 million one year in tax title payments. So we then return that into free cash and the town decides how to spend it. Beyond that, if you take all that off the table, there are years when town departments return money just like the schools do. But the vast majority of the money that is being generated into free cash comes from building permits, which are not part of the budget. We pay the building commissioner and the other parts of that department out of the general fund. Every penny that comes in for a building permit winds up in free cash at the end of the year. That's the way our budget is designed. So the schools don't have the opportunity to generate revenue like that. So when you say the town generating $3 million in free cash, that's because we budgeted conservatively and got a tax title, or got a FEMA payment for the storms 3 years ago, or whatever. It's not because our departments are returning thousands of dollars of unspent budgeted money.
And to
We
your
are
point,
returning
Andrew,
small amounts of budgeted money like the schools, and this is the other side of that coin. I do encourage what the chairman said, an honest appraisal of our money and giving back what we don't need, and not spending the last dollar, spend it or lose it, is a good philosophy to have, and I encourage it within the town departments, and I'm glad to see the schools share that philosophy and return what money they don't spend. But to Terrence's point, if you're asking for money and you say you really need it, and then you return money, there's some sort of discontinuity there, because they're not returning money because they generated revenue, they're returning it because they didn't spend it.
Yeah, and I think sort of connected. The whole reason we have that FinCom reserve fund is for the emergencies that departments might overspend. And over the past several years, there's been very few uses of that money from any department. So, and I remember back many years ago, the former chief got very upset because we, at the time, increased the amount of the FinCom reserve, mainly because the police department was returning money to us. So we said, you don't need that much money. And he said, well, what do you want me to do? Just like Bob said, go out and buy all sorts of stuff. I'm getting punished for working well within my budget. So that's the back and forth.
I'm embarrassed to say there are a cache of 3-ring binders in storage here in Town Hall from department head in years past that thought spend it or lose it was the right thing to do. We're trying to use them and not throw them away, but we're also not buying any more 3-ring binders.
Yeah, that's the point.
Thank you.
So once we know what's there, we'll let you know.
All right, sounds very good. Thank you.
If I could, I want to be respectful of your time, but I do just want to leave you with this thought. The message was delivered by several members of your board very loud and clear last year through this process, that at times we intentionally or unintentionally created a us and a you type situation. Chris, I know you've referenced it on several occasions tonight, Terrence as well.
Sort of the
animosity that we either intentionally or unintentionally created. We've had many discussions as a board. We're trying to take a very deliberate approach this year to really maintain an even tone and try to make it an us conversation and not a BOS or a school committee or a FinCom conversation, because we are all in this together. And that feedback that came through direct channels and indirect channels was heard loud and clear this year. And I'm hopeful that there's not as much of a negative perception of your side the way that it was last year, because at times I can understand your perspective of how unfair that might have felt.
I don't have the slightest bit of a negative perception about you guys or your budget or any of it. I just think that there were some things that were said that I didn't think were particularly true or particularly fair. And in particular, one of them was the last time you guys were in here, people said, oh, we were surprised at the difference in the budgets. And I said, how can you be surprised? We saw every week what Kevin was offering for the budget, and we saw on the 10th what it was. Now, what took place in other meetings?
We didn't.
Okay, whatever took place in other meetings, what we were looking at in this room as the 5 of us up here, based on what Kevin Sweet was giving us every week, was the exact same number that appeared on his budget report in the library on February 10th. And so for people to say to us in this setting, like we were surprised, like we as a group had promised more than that, was I didn't think that was fair.
And just as a
and I didn't think it was accurate.
And
by the way, I get the emails. I'm reading them right now in front of me that afterwards. Oh, here's why and here's what happened, and I'm like, oh, okay. But
well, as a point, I'm going to take this one because I think again we've had the substantive component of the conversation, and I mean just to respond to that particular point in the event that it comes up again circularly, as reflected in the minutes of our meeting on January 11th of the subcommittee, which was made up of the school, the Board of Selectmen, and the FinCom, our Chief Financial Officer indicated in that meeting his hope, based on the numbers, that we would be able to close the gap. That is the terminology that was reflected in the meeting minutes of January 11th. Now, different people might, that's a hope. Right. And so I think it's legitimate to say, oh, okay, wow, that's not then seeing a 300K gap from what we had asked for. That doesn't seem close. So I think that was the background, the basis of the comment that was made in your previous presentation to the board was driven by that. Obviously, not every member of the Board of Selectmen participates in that subcommittee, but, you know, I pulled back up the minutes, shared that back with the board to let them know that that was kind of the basis of what you and Mary were referring to in that statement, so.
And also the fact that the first time that we saw the difference was February 10th at the meeting. I don't know whether we should have seen it first, but that's why Mary Murch's presentation was all based around that, because we honestly had not seen or heard anything, any specific prior to that.
And that's a learning experience for us, I think, because if I remember correctly, the previous Tuesday before the Saturday meeting, Kevin, at the time, and I'm not disparaging Kevin at all, had mentioned what the numbers looked like they were going to be, and I remember asking him specifically, have you run that by the schools, or are the schools aware of it? And he said, no, not yet, but I will be speaking with them. That's my recollection. But that's, you know, and again, we learn from that.
Right.
And so once a number is finalized in the future, we should now, I guess, relay that to the schools so that your presentation isn't based on numbers that are you know, misunderstood or misconstrued.
I'll just say in closing, I appreciate your, and I would tend to agree with you. I feel a marked improvement. I see a marked improvement in the relationship between. We're always going to have disagreements like tonight. I mean, I may not agree with Dr. Girardi's point of view sometimes. I'm sure he doesn't agree with mine, right? But I do think that we've done a really good job of at least initiating a change, and everyone's participated, and that bodes well for the future. Whether we get all the money we need is a different story, but the dialogue is certainly there. You've had people like Cheryl and David have stepped up to form a subcommittee with Mary and Mary.
it's been very
FinCom,
productive.
And
Yeah.
that's something we've been missing for a while, so.
Right. No, it's been very productive.
Just final piece, Chris, we were in a room, I think it was one of our early meetings. You said you would love to hear more about all the good things that we're doing and not always just hear the negative that's coming out. We really took that comment of yours to heart. I hope that if you were to drop into one of our meetings now, we're spending 99% of our time talking about all of the great things that are happening and letting the other 1% of the work be done.
On social media, I see it. I see it on social media too, but I'm not making light of it, but I do see it out there. I do see more of it. You know, you see more of it. You know, you see more of it, and that's awesome. And that's what we were talking about, you know, say, we got, you guys, like I said, right, I think it's important to talk about, you know, the positive things that happen, not just in schools, but all across town. You know, it's important to sit here and say, you know, for those of us that travel outside of Maynard every day, you know, down 62 or Route 2 or out 117, to say that, you know what, the 4 miles I traveled in Maynard were the best 4 miles of road I traveled today, and I drive 75 miles a day each way. So you know, I've been on all the roads in the state. I'm always crisscrossing the state. When I can come back and say, geez, the last few miles right in the town I live in are the best 4 miles I drove on my way out this morning, my way back this afternoon, that's nice. It's a positive thing to be able to say, and the same with, you know, other things in town. And the schools are the same thing, but, you know, you see it on social media, and you see it in different places, and it's good to see now. We didn't see it before. You guys didn't see it before. But it's good to see, and certainly, you know, the money's the money, and if we have the money, like I've been saying since every meeting since we first met a year and a half ago, we have the money, we'll give it to you. But we don't know we have the money yet. Andrew's gonna tell us in a little while. We don't wanna wait outside or go home and watch the film, we'll tell you, but we don't know what the money is until we know, and then once we know what it is, we're happy to, you know, share with the schools, and, you know, and I wasn't saying that you guys don't realize what the accommodated costs are, but what I was saying was, you know, there's been a history of kind of going like this when it comes up, you know, in some cases, and then not so much when it's other cases. But I think everybody in this room, and I can't speak for anybody but myself, is more than happy to give any excess money we have that's available to the schools, because, you know, it's important. But we have to know we don't know what that money is yet, and we haven't even, so we couldn't find it yet. So once we find it, I'll have my guy call your guy.
Fair enough.
That's good.
Thank you.
Sorry,
So where we
we didn't
go.
mean to take so much time.
When does Michelle come back, by the way, Bob?
What's that?
When does she come back?
She was hoping to come back tomorrow, but there's a snowstorm. It might be Thursday.
I hope she's gonna be stuck. I hope she's gonna be stuck somewhere warm.
Let's hope it's a small snowstorm, so we can keep the school.
All right.
Less. That's the good news.
All right.
Around minus 300.
Okay, now we're into the special meeting, town meeting warrant articles, and who's gonna discuss them. So, anybody got any favorites?
I'll do the fire station.
I'll tell you what happened.
Oh, I thought there was a list in there.
Wait a second. I'll tell you what happened.
I thought your name was on everything, Chris.
Yes, well, somebody tried to do that, but we didn't let them happen. So what happened today was, we had a meeting that was called by Mr. Town Moderator, Dick Downey, and we discussed the fact that items 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, and 9 would be a consent calendar. If I say anything wrong, straighten me out. So we're gonna have a consent calendar for 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, and 9.
Okay, so that's,
So I will read each of those, and then I will turn the floor over to Bill Coleman, and he will speak to each of them, we'll speak about each one, but we'll only vote once for all 6 of them.
okay, and that's 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9?
1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9.
Okay.
Which leaves 2. Okay, which leaves number 2, which is the,
Board of Health.
no, it's, yeah, but it's a 2/3 majority vote. So Bill Coleman is gonna do that one himself.
Not 2/3 majority, just majority.
It's a change in
Yeah,
bylaw,
majority-
but it
yeah.
just requires a 2/3.
No, it's just a
Oh, it's
regular vote.
majority, it's majority.
Why didn't we take that one?
I'm gonna have to look up what it is, but.
That's the one for the,
It was different than the
The
others.
Board of Health nuisances.
I think it's
Yeah, I
'cause
need the
it
details
deals
on
with
it.
the fines and stuff.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah,
that's,
the fines are actually changing in that one, I believe, as
Yeah.
opposed to the other ones where they're just changing the wording of the
oh, it's
bylaw.
because this has
so
a
that
dollar
one- yeah, so
figure
that one's
against
Bill
it.
Coleman. We have to open that
Door has to be
door.
open.
That door needs to be open.
So number 4,
Ask
which
them to move into the conference
is-
room,
all right, so
please.
here's a funny conversation I had today.
So Coleman's taking 2, is that what I heard?
Bill Coleman's gonna do 2, yep. 3 is in the consent.
Yep,
4,
yep.
which is the establishment of the Disabled and Elderly Taxation Relief Fund, Chapter 60, Section 3D.
David?
I don't know who wants to handle that, but the town moderator has requested that only people that get up there that are intimately and the most knowledgeable person we have on each item get up to discuss a particular item, so that we don't have any confusion. So
That's a private guy,
who would like to discuss that?
I'll take it.
All right.
Whose is it?
It's,
It's the board's.
That was the one we,
Well,
that was,
Not all 5 of us came up with the idea, is what I'm saying.
no, I don't
It says
know.
David Gavin
No,
on there,
no, you know where that came from? Mary brought that to us.
No, I did.
Isn't that the one that Mary Brantley brought us?
I did.
Oh, she brought the scholarship
Mary
one.
piggybacked.
David's owning it.
All right, so you want to talk about that, David?
Yes, thanks for
All
the
right.
pressure.
And,
from the
no, and so one of the
Yeah, and now you better
questions,
be
so
well
just so
informed.
you're aware, one of the questions that came up that's in that little meeting that we had this afternoon, that someone suggested might be asked when that question comes up, was, I wrote it down. just
And I
in
bet I
case,
have it too, because it came up in FinCom last night.
Was, yeah, that's where he got it, he's not very original. It came up and it was, what's the cost to the town for this?
Oh, none.
There's none.
Well, there's none, but then the
Mailing.
discussion was the mailing and the work.
Administrative costs.
But
And
that goes in the same thing with what Mary Brantley
Right.
just had.
So then the discussion was, well, maybe we could, town council was gonna check and see if we could take the money to cover that expense out of the fund.
That's right, so the question was, even though it's a donation-based fund, there is a cost to administer it, including a mailing. So we had estimated that there might be $1,000 or more a year to administer this fund, and where would that money come from if it wasn't supposed to cost the town anything? And so the question was, can it come from the fund? And there were other sort of downstream questions from that, like, do we have to do it if there's not very much money in the fund? Town council said, the committee that's charged with administering this sets those rules. So for instance, they might only distribute funds if there was more than $10,000 available.
Got
They
it.
can set that rule and.
So you're
move
talking
forward.
about the costs associated after there's a fund established. So
Yes.
that is well enough, that is large enough to really make a meaningful difference.
Yes. The cost to do a mailing to every home in town or
Yeah, so even
whatever.
if it's like 300, if it's an additional postage cost of 3 cents per letter, who's going to cover that additional 3
Yes.
cents?
This was a anticipated potential question, and the moderator doesn't want somebody up there who
Not
doesn't know how to
prepared.
answer that already.
Yes, but my understanding of the process is that the request for any donations goes out just as Mary Brantley's thing did, within an envelope. Why wasn't anybody asking any questions about what the cost of Mary Brantley's mailing was, when it's the same costs involved, because you're putting, those, Mary Branley's thing came with the, was it excise or the,
One of them.
the excise bill? Was it excise?
Well, I don't know, yeah, but he doesn't know if anyone's gonna ask. He's just saying,
No,
for
no,
instance, if
I
someone
get
asks.
that, but I guess the
Either
point
way, we
is-
should have an
This
answer.
is precisely what the moderator is looking to avoid. If we
Right.
stumble like this at the town meeting,
Exactly.
it doesn't look good. So whomever
So-
knows the answers to these questions that we might be able to anticipate should be the
Yeah.
So-
person who's presenting.
What I would suggest, though, I think where David's going with this, right, is we've got two potential avenues for a response to that question as to whether or not it is no cost, right? One answer to that question is that, you know, as you suggested, that the fund itself, once it gets to a certain level, will reimburse the town for any costs associated with the mailing. I would argue a second approach to that would be, I think, where David was going, which is we look into what was the decision the town made around the inclusion of the ask for the scholarship fund, and was the decision that, oh, this is such a negligible cost, i.e., it's an additional $25 for the mailing to go out, I think the answer to where town council is going, that is because this is no cost to the town, then we need to provide an answer that says the cost would be reimbursed from the fund once it reaches a threshold level.
That's the simplest question, because
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with this Mary Branley request.
Well,
But-
just our last,
It's a separate mailing.
Yeah.
It costs about $5,000 just for the
but
postage.
it's not supposed to be a separate mailing. It's supposed to go out with the tax bill.
My understanding of this fund is it's a separate solicitation.
That wasn't the way it was written when we read the statute at the time that we were
I
talking.
understand, and I'm not the expert here, I'm telling you.
Can we find out,
The way it's-
before, can we find
Yeah.
out from Lisa Mead before the town meeting?
How much it will
Legal
cost.
interpretation, the cost, if it is a separate mailing,
It's not.
we already know that, and, well, this is part of that rules thing. The town treasurer has said, this can't be administered through are you talking about like where they put a little line on the bottom of the tax bill saying, send in extra money for the scholarship fund?
Yeah.
Because this process, the way it was in the thing, the town treasurer has said it needs to be handled in a different method with a checkbox, check off. She can't do that in our existing format. So she said it would be a separate mailing, which is what I think
That
drove
was
the
never
town
the
accountant's
intention.
comment today.
That was never the intention.
Yeah.
The intention was to make it a very simple process where it goes out with each and every bill, and it arrives with each and every bill, not separately from, it's not intended to cause an expense to the community.
I'm not arguing with you, David, I'm letting you know what I'm hearing from the staff internally about how
Well, I
it might
think that,
actually work.
part of it may be because they don't want to process it. That may be part of it.
I'm gonna ask the town treasurer to put her thoughts in writing, and I'll distribute it.
All right.
And we'll figure out who the best person to speak to
Okay.
those types of questions would be then.
I
If
think
there's an
that-
expense to the town, that was not the intent.
Can you
It was
communicate
intended-
that to her
That's-
though?
and
Like
to-
what
and to-
our intention was, because it was supposed to be designed just like the scholarship fund when David brought it up.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Actually,
I'm
the
not-
original-
I'm not trying to derail this, we're trying to.
Yeah, no, the original discussion was, this came up first, and the original discussion was that Mary happened to be here when we discussed it one night, and she said, oh, we could do my thing.
That's right.
Right afterwards in the same envelope.
And
So-
hers
so that
started,
was
hers
the-
got out
and
there
hers got out there
first.
first
and
and it's done, but, all right. So
I'll get
that's-
the legal
it's a whole
opinion
different
and
thing,
the
yeah.
practical boots on the ground
Yeah,
opinion
okay.
about what this might cost in terms of.
I think if you read the statute, and it's been a while since I read the statute, but if you read the statute, you will see that it is included in the tax bill.
I don't know,
I
anyway.
Can,
understand that piece of it, I'm trying to get the practical.
All right, we'll figure it, we'll get,
Along with the legal point.
yeah, we'll
if
figure it
if
out.
I may, there was a different question that came up as a possible question from last night's finance committee meeting, which was, we may get questions at town meeting on how the resulting fund would be managed and dispersed.
That is all outlined within the statute itself. It's managed by a specific.
As long as you have the answer.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
it
this
has-
is more about just like.
You have to form a committee and it's all like super,
It's all
super detailed in
perfect.
the statute.
It's all
Yeah.
identified by the statute.
All right, so, all right. The fund will be, this is what it says on the article itself, it says the fund will be created and maintained with voluntary donations. Contribution forms may be mailed with the annual excise tax bills to all residents in Maynard. That's what it says in the article. So we just have to deal with it. But we'll have to find out by Monday. That was 4. 5, number 5 is gonna be done as part of the consent
Yeah.
calendar. 6, I believe Bill Coleman's gonna talk about the sidewalk seating and whatnot of everything else, right?
So, yeah, that one we also expect to see some questions from the floor on, and that is the, whether or not we can serve alcohol outdoor seating at our restaurants. Right now, it's restricted. This article would allow it with the Board of Selectmen's approval.
All right, 7, 8, and 9 are Bill Coleman's as well. And then 10, acceptance of a gift. There were some questions whether the town will accept a
Sure,
gift.
tied, yeah.
And so the acceptance of the gift of land, I mean, I can do that. That's the land, the little sliver of land by the, you know, by the well.
Yep.
That makes up the 200, how is it, 200, 300 feet?
400 feet from the
400
well.
feet from the well, and that's, what is it, about a 15-foot piece of land we're talking about?
Yes, I
It's a
know.
few
Yeah,
thousand square
little
feet.
pie chart, yeah, so we'll have that, so I can do that one. Does anybody want to take the next one, which is the acceptance of the easement for the same piece of property, but in the
We
front
should
half?
probably do them together, right?
All right, I do that one too.
Nice try.
Thank you.
You seem to know it really well.
12, okay there, Melissa. 12 is the acceptance of the local acceptance of tax provisions. I don't know, someone told me you were an expert.
She volunteered last
So
meeting.
12,
I would do the
wait a minute,
marijuana stuff,
12? Is it 12, 13, and 14 of marijuana?
Yeah, I said I would do those with town council.
Okay, so that's good
He's
enough.
gonna be up there the whole time to help deflect.
Right, yeah,
She'll be
Kate
on
Farrell.
stage, so you could handle it. It's
Hey, the guy was here tonight to get that font so he could make up our name tag, so we got that working for us.
one of the moderator's concerns was that in past, like, people would come up from the floor, and it'd be like this 1 minute or so delay before the person got up to the podium.
Right.
Or they try to answer the question from the floor. Kate's gonna be right there.
Okay.
So if you can't field it, she's
just
gonna have a microphone in front of her.
Kate
I like
is-
the questions,
yeah,
there'd
Kate-
be so many questions and so many.
Kate's sitting behind us. She sits behind us, right?
The attorneys sit in
they're
the row
behind me,
behind
yeah.
you, yeah.
Right.
So,
So-
and just as an FYI, the things that came up at FinCom last night, at least
Yeah.
with Article 12, so the comment was, should we have an opportunity, should one come to town, we should take advantage of the opportunity to put the tax on it. So like, sort of, it's
Yeah.
not making a pre-decision about establishments, but opening an opportunity to get the tax later.
Yeah.
Similarly, the comment on Article 13 was, again, it's not a commitment to the establishments, but it puts the authorities in place, was kind of the rationale behind FinCom. And then, let me just see, there was a lot of comments around the Article 14. FinCom recommends, but felt it was pretty broad brush, as the central business district does include residences. There was more kind of an open discussion of the types of questions they think might come up from, as residents actually look at what sits in the different zoning elements that are there, and as they have questions.
The whole strip of, the one contentious plot is the strip of land in front of the library. That whole strip is considered
Right.
business.
So they said, it's the proposed zoning bylaws in this article, the final section of it says that in the comments, proposed zoning bylaws cover only basic zoning restrictions. Additional regulatory framework would be developed by the board and the Board of Health. Need to validate also whether or not planning board has a role in that piece of this.
Well-
Let me just go through there. And then their other piece was to be aware resident reaction when looking at the map. The special permit requirements is good news. Less worried about zoning, and to think about, one thing they framed was that people might also ask whether or not tied to the zoning, ends up being a negative impact on assessment values of personal property or residential homes as a result.
That would be like complete speculation.
Yep.
though, like, without, right? Like, I wouldn't know.
And then there might be questions to kind of like, why are we taking this kind of broad brush approach compared to other towns? And so one of the examples cited was, I guess, Marlborough has taken the decision of only approving Route 20 at 2 locations and not across their citywide central business district. So, anyway, those were just some of
So, I mean, it's-
the notional questions that might get surfaced.
Right, and so it's still all by special permit anyway. So it's still by special, it's all by special permit, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the,
It still has to come back ultimately, yeah,
yeah,
to the
I mean,
licensing.
that's the protection for those things, but,
Like, no one could just go open a marijuana store
Yeah,
in
yeah,
front of the
still-
library without like our
right.
knowledge or
Right.
consent, which I think is the clear
Right.
point to get across.
okay. So up to the last one, which is the fire station.
I'll take that one.
So I have to read, they told me I have to read the whole entire motion, and then I'll turn it over to yourself and Chief Star Wars, or is that? So I miss you.
We'll
can-
practice our.
So I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty,
Acquisition of the land, you mean, right?
Yeah.
yes, yeah, the acquisition of land. So I'm pretty sure that when a question comes up and everything, you can come on, I think you'll be able to come up to the microphone with Cheryl and handle the questions that come up as they come up. I mean, you know.
Last year, it worked out fine.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I don't know, he was a little jiggy about certain things, but that's what we've done in the past, so we'll just do it the same way. Unless anyone objects.
Do you feel left out, Terrence?
I do not.
You get everything in May.
He's gonna just sit there and look
What again, you gonna
grumpy.
throw me up there and like a lightning rod and just, you're gonna say, he's pushing everything because he's leaving?
You can take one for the team.
Yeah.
That's what they've been run.
The what?
You can be the walker over to Dick.
You can bring one to Dick.
No, he can come get it from me if he wants.
He's not coming over, he's,
Yeah.
all right, so,
Why do we have an admin?
Put like a single.
She's looking to get off her feet.
There you go, you can walk it over, right?
I don't mind.
All
all
right.
right, so,
Sold.
Yep.
we're talking about the controls for May 21st?
So, yeah, so on the one you just finished there, the edited versions of this from this afternoon's meeting and some of the comments tonight will be ready for you guys on Monday night and nice and organized. You won't be fumbling for paper. You'll know what order
Thanks,
those-
Chief.
It's all done.
Do we need to bring anything for Monday night, having never gone to
Ain't he
any
telling you it's gonna
event
snow
before?
tomorrow?
We're downgraded to 4 to 6
Bring your
inches.
wallet. I'll
Oh,
bring
good.
I'm still pushing for rain.
Try bringing
Yes.
sweet.
Wait till Maynard Soccer asked him to plow the field so the kids can get out and play. A couple years ago, the baseball team wanted us to do it. So, all right, so we're on to the regular town meeting ones, right?
That's correct.
What, is it,
Item 11.
is there anything to discuss or just
They're not nearly
for
as-
reading?
Yeah.
So some of these are still incomplete, some of them are ready to go, but we're keeping them in here so you can see them.
All right, so
The only one we really need to discuss is the citizens petition that came in this week, this past week.
what is the citizen's petition?
Number 6.
P. Item P.
Okay, I mean,
P.
So a local developer has put forth a citizen's petition to change the use table in the industrial zone to allow medical office. And it's been approved as to form and so on by the town council, and the signatures were certified by the town clerk. So at this point, it's a valid petition. The selectman's job is to move it to consideration by the planning board, and then it comes back and gets put on the warrant for May. If the planning board approves it, and that requires a public hearing, so all the details of it get debated at the, through the normal process, except that it came up to us through a citizen petition.
It's draft control P is the item, which doesn't really tell you much about
Yeah,
it.
what is it?
You can open it up and see it. So it's the,
They have.
you have the.
So are there two documents named the same?
The one
The
that's
PDF will
labeled.
open, the doc doesn't
Yeah.
seem to open, right?
CP Industrial
Wow.
Zone Use
Yeah.
Change is the one you want to open to understand what it is.
Okay,
so
got
it
it.
says, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw, making the following changes to section 3.1.2. Table A, use regulations, item 1 in subsection 4, business uses, column for the industrial 1 district, change the entry for medical office from N to PB.
What's
So that's
behind
I,
this?
not one. It's
I,
industrial
okay.
zone.
It's all-
And
Where is
N
it?
is
It's all
no,
marijuana,
you're doing-
yeah.
and
Yeah, yeah.
PB is with planning
Right,
board approval.
Right, where is I?
I is in the industrial zone, so anywhere on our zoning table that's in gray, it includes the areas up near Rockland Ave, the area down, the entire 129
zoning
Parker
map
Street
is-
development, that's all underlying zoning is industrial. There's a very small sliver down by the mobile station, across the street from that. And the area adjacent to 129 Parker, which is where this petition came from,
Yeah, that's
is the 141 Parker
the
Street.
old digital
Oh,
complex.
the
the DCU
DCU,
Bank.
yeah.
They've been in front of the planning board,
And then the
to
Stratus
discuss about-
property is also industrial.
So,
discuss about, they portray it as being, oh, we'd like to have medical offices in there, which is wonderful, great idea, but something to be concerned about, or at least aware of, is that does become then a potential location for
medical
medical
marijuana.
marijuana or anything else, if that's an issue of concern. But it's always what are the underlying,
Yeah, my curiosity would be, given how this would overlap. So I mean, if I understand the real question here is, well, it's appropriate to be referred to the planning board
It's really your only option.
at this point.
Yeah.
But I think we need to have guidance to the planning board to take a look at this in the context of the warrant articles that are coming before special town meeting with the marijuana zoning. And what would this, if these zoning changes were made, what would the marijuana zoning map then look like?
So, and
Parker
that's,
Street
that's part
project
of the
doesn't-
public hearing process, and
Yeah.
and I can certainly let the town planner know that the board's concern is there, but so this goes to the planning board and then becomes part of a public hearing that presumably would be held someday in April. Because it has to be held, obviously, before the Maytown meeting. And at that public hearing, those concerns from the community would be heard, then the planning board would recommend it or not to be included on the warrant. The
So the planning
board would then
board-
do that.
And apologies
Just
for
for-
asking you to give me a civics lesson, but, so the planning board, let's say at that public meeting that they host, if there was significant public reaction to say no, could the planning board then vote not to include the warrant?
They could.
Okay.
Or to, I'm not positive about that. They could certainly not recommend it.
Not recommended to
They-
go,
they
and
may
then
not-
they would have to go back to a secondary step to try and get around, okay.
Right, but
The
to
board,
not.
the Board of Selectmen
yeah.
cannot reject a
Yeah,
citizen's
this,
petition.
yeah,
Right.
I get that part. I'm just curious about what will
Just to
happen next.
clarify one point that Andrew made, you said that industrial includes 129 Parker Street. Well, in reality, that is the underlying district.
That's right.
So that if a project goes in there, it's no longer industrial, it now becomes NBOD, which is exclusive of some of the things that are found. But however, that one particular building, what used to be DCU, is an industrial.
That's not in the NBOD.
That's not in
fact-
the NBOD,
That's right. In
correct.
fact, this particular petitioner came to the planning board previously asking if the NBOD could be applied to that parcel. And, we understood what they were trying to do, and we said, no, that's inappropriate. That's really spot zoning, one parcel getting its own zone. And the NBOD wouldn't have done for them what they want to do.
Yeah.
I have no idea if this is a medical marijuana application, by the
know
way,
either.
but the underlying zoning of the 129 Parker Street is industrial.
Correct.
That's very important in the big context.
Yes,
Okay. The NBOD really doesn't apply to this conversation.
Okay.
correct.
So the old Stratus property, the northeast part of town, that whole area we just talked about, and then there's a little sliver over by the mobile station. There's a dentist's office, something over there. I'm not
Yep,
exactly sure.
Venus Dental or something,
Yeah, it's a very strange
Unless it's
thing that
building,
it's there, but there's a very small parcel that is industrial zone,
And
So-
what's the mill? Healthcare industrial.
healthcare industrial.
Yeah, HCI. So this would change all of them?
All the industrial zones would now be changed
Wow.
from no medical uses to
Okay.
planning board special permit.
Oh, so it would change everywhere.
But still a special permit though, so.
Special permit, but in reality, special permits are never rejected.
No, but
They
they have
might-
to be, not
They have
rejected,
to
they have
have
to
a
be
public
voted on.
hearing, but there's,
So do we know who brought this forward? I know it came from a law firm.
So the law firm of Mark Bobrowski brought it forth. He's the attorney for the owner of 141 Parker Street. So that's the applicant.
But it has to be, if it's a citizen's petition, it has to be signed by, for an annual town meeting, 10 residents or
what's on
something
Their
like
names are,
that.
they brought in
So I
11
see-
signatures,
I see
one was
12
rejected
signatures
by the
there.
clerk. They do have the 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're in the packet. If you open up the CP document, the signatures are included in there on page 4 or 5.
Yep.
And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
in the draft control version, they're all certified.
You, yeah. All right.
Terrence, I don't know the name of the petitioner off the top of my head. I just know the attorney.
I think it's somewhat, what's the word I want to use? Ironic. Mark Bobrowski he used to be with Lisa Mead's firm.
He used to be Lisa Mead's
He used
firm.
to be Lisa Mead's firm.
He retired and she picked up the ashes of that firm as he went into the sunset.
Apparently the sun's still shining on him. All right, well,
So it's the place where the publisher is now.
that place, that's the building,
All right. Revenue.
all right. And what about the budget? But we're on to the budget update, right?
Yep.
All right, Mr. Andrew.
Obvious mistake.
That's the one that's right over there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, with like the bank there.
Used to be a bank there, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I remember.
The bank, that's
Yeah.
Digital DCU's bank
Oh,
office,
did
right?
did we act on all those things, Chris?
Yeah.
What's that?
Did we act on all the items?
Yeah, we did all the items.
Are you gonna motion it?
We didn't motion it, though.
Did we get a motion?
For
Yeah.
the contract.
All right, so oh, boy.
Gotta read them all, too. You wanna be chairman, huh?
I will read them off. That's what the law says I gotta do.
So the recommended action is in your,
Says says review motions for special town meeting on Monday, March
It says
26th.
review next, it says move to accept draft control I,
You have this one? Here.
accept and approve draft control J, K, and L.
Who knows which one's the right one?
What does it say?
These are all the things you need to do. Move to accept. Numbers 1 through 6. Those are the motions.
For the May 21st ones?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got that. I thought, I was looking back at the other one. Okay. I get it now. All right, I thought we were still in the other one. All right.
Still gotta use the paper.
Well, I move to accept draft control. Make a motion.
So you don't update this one.
Can we do them all at once? We have to vote them separate.
do them all at once.
Yeah, you can keep reading.
All right, so I'm going to read the whole thing. The recommended action, move to accept draft control I, Community Preservation Fund Budget Fiscal Year 2019. Move to accept and approve draft control J, K, and L. J is the fire station design plan. K is the long-term lease for 63 Summer Street. L is disposal of 12 Bancroft. Move to accept draft control M, Special Education, Chapter 40, Section 13E. Move to accept and approve draft control N, Salary Administration Plan. Move to accept draft control P, Citizens Petition Amend Zoning Bylaw referring to Planning Board. Do I have a second?
Excuse me,
You
you
missed
skipped number
O.
5.
Because it doesn't, well, because it didn't say
Jim
that.
said move to accept, it said draft
can't.
control.
You did it right.
You don't have the language. You did it
Sorry,
right.
beg your pardon.
It's perfect.
I've been
You
doing
are
this.
perfect,
I'm
Chris.
reading,
I'm
but
not
not paying
perfect.
attention.
You
Sorry.
you know who's gonna tell you I'm not. All right, so anyway, so that's
Have a
those,
second.
that are those. We have a second from Cheryl.
Thank
Do we have any more discussion about the, those controls?
Thank you.
All right, all those in favor of the controls?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For the record, O, the one I was just mistaken about, the planning board was supposed to take that up last week. Their meeting was canceled, and they're hearing it tonight.
Okay.
Excuse me.
I guess we can go on to the budget. Please, number 12.
Any questions after we covered most of it in the school committee meeting?
So the number,
How?
yeah, bang. So the number that we're looking at, okay, just for
Right.
giggles, is 146,000.
So there's a couple pieces there. So that's the number as we calculated.
I'm looking at 129.
I'm more than happy to stand behind that number. We are doing something called post-65, which is we're moving retirees off of the active employee health plans who are not eligible for Medicare. And the federal government is allowing us to do this, but we have to pay a penalty. That penalty actually makes it more expensive for the retiree health plans than if we leave them on the active plans. But our insurance carrier will reduce our rate so much because these people are such heavy users of health insurance that the loss ratio will go down because Medicare pays all the bills instead of the town in terms of the premiums and the service costs. So the net result is we save money. It's 14 people. We have currently moved 13 of them. If we move the 14th by March 30th, we get the bonus discount. And that bonus discount will be approximately another 70,000. I say approximately because how much we save depends on which retiree health plan that 14th person takes. And that, so a couple small unknowns, but we're going to have roughly $200,000 to $220,000 available after March 31st. We'll know. And so the worst case number you see, the best case number is about 210, 220,000.
Okay.
But if we waited until, say, April 3rd or April 10th, our next meeting, it could be a more definitive conversation. Giving it to you tonight gives you a chance to sort of reflect on it And also attached to that document was the cuts Selectman Steele mentioned earlier when you gave Kevin Sweet direction on the budget planning. You asked for the impacts of not funding things. And so what I've given you is a summary of the budget requests that came in from the town side that were either cut or not even considered for funding in our budget on February 10th. And I've also taken the time to prioritize that list. If I was given the choice, what I would restore, and the finance director has also provided his priorities. He and I are basically in alignment for the most part on the highest priorities from that list. So I believe there's about $340,000 in unfunded or cut services, and we're recommending consideration to restore about 110,000 of those. Speaking real rough numbers there. I don't have it in front of me.
How does our, again, because I feel like my job tonight is just to constantly read ahead one agenda item, but I noticed in the town administrator's report, my favorite number, which is our ever-increasing snow and ice deficit. I'm looking at you, Aaron. Which is now 300K and growing as of tomorrow. As of
tonight, it's about just over 290,000. That includes the current payroll that comes out this week. It does not include tomorrow's anticipated storm.
Non-event, tomorrow's non-event.
Tomorrow's non-event has not yet been considered. So we are right around $300,000 deficit.
And I was just trying to figure out like how that gets managed within the budget process.
So we have a $117,000 snow and ice budget.
Right.
And we're going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $500,000 in snow and ice expenses. And we need to pay those off before we start the next fiscal year. Typically, we have dipped into free cash. When I say typically, in the past several years, the norm has been to dip into free cash to cover that. We also have access to reserve fund monies to transfer. And this year, it will undoubtedly be a combination of those two.
Okay. So from a planning perspective, then, as we look at the potential of anywhere from 140K to 220K in savings coming in, as we look at this, do we need to be thinking of some portion of that? Because I know it's not listed on the prioritized list, but should we have a line item that says contribution towards snow and ice deficit?
So the second document in the sheet there, one of them was the health insurance cost projection.
Yep.
And that was sort of getting into the weeds there with when the schools were here. We didn't want to cover all of that detail, but
right.
In that you can see where the 6% applies and where it doesn't. But the other document is that prioritization list. And again, these are simply recommendations from the town. These are ultimately your decisions. You could take 100% of that money and leave it off the tax levy, essentially lowering our tax rate when it gets set next November. You could use it to restore town spending requests that are here, or you consider giving it to the schools, or some combination of those three things. Selectman Steele, you mentioned earlier in talking to Ms. Branley that there was this was a free cash situation. That's actually not the case. This is actually operating money.
Okay.
It's not one-time money.
Cool.
This is either in the budget or it's off the levy, and which budget it's in is up to you to decide.
Got it.
When does this money become available? If it's available?
It's a July 1st health insurance rate increase. It actually hits the books with the June payrolls, but the delta on the June payrolls is insignificant. But it's a July 1st spending money if you put it into the budget.
So my point being, if we decided to give it to any portion of the other expenses on the town side, and/or any portion of it to the schools, when would the DPW and/or the schools be able to realize this income?
July 1, 2018.
Okay.
Just as with the rest of their budget.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fiscal 19 budget.
So it's not something that
it's new revenue, essentially.
We're going to realize the savings immediately in the new year.
Essentially, there's no real savings. If you recall, the budget we have, I think it's $42 or $43 million. What we've identified is we're going to spend $140,000 less of that on health insurance than we thought we were. So it's not new money, it's a reallocation of the existing budget.
Right. Yeah.
So but that money, if the
Hence why, like.
health insurance rate was at 9.6% like budgeted for, it would be there on July 1st.
And that's why, like Bob Girardi was saying, that, for example, out of the health number budget, they could use that to go back into their projections and put it towards
Right.
a salary thing as opposed to a single capital.
That's right. But had our health insurance number come in at 11 or 12%.
Right, no, I took your
We'd be
point.
looking for $100,000 more, and that would be additional cuts from somewhere.
Absolutely.
But probably from the town side.
Most likely.
Well, historically, that's the case, which is why I was mentioning earlier about the Assabet money versus the
Right.
accommodated costs. The accommodated costs are the money that is shared expenses. It's not mine or yours, it's ours. And health insurance is a good example. That's the biggest of those.
Right.
Andrew, on the first spreadsheet that's included on this where you give the prioritization, who's FD?
So that's the finance director, so
Okay.
TA
All
and then
right.
FD.
Okay.
And the prioritizations are simply alphabetized. There may be a couple exceptions to that, but they're not in any priority order within their little grouping. The ABC priority is the
group.
is the ranking, yeah.
Okay.
There's going to be a group of people that are pushing for that.
Yeah, the library.
heard about it?
I have, yeah. And I told them that's something that they should bring the data forward on.
Annual internship.
Just as an aside, just as background for some of the members of the board, for one of the line items, I think a couple of members have had outreach or heard informally from the library about that ask around the open 3 hours piece for the additional time. My understanding from those who've reached out to me about it is that it's largely being driven by requests that they have for use of meeting space that they're not able to accommodate. And when I heard about that, I said, I mentioned the fact that I don't think I was yet on the board when the libraries had come in to do their presentation for their budget and their budget request, but I didn't recall that that had been something that had been put before the board. So I just kind of made the observation that if there is data behind that in terms of the number of times that they get asks that they can't accommodate or people that they're turning away for events, that would be of benefit to the library, thereby the town, that would be useful information for the board to have. So I'll try and put that back out to my network.
I know the director has that information.
Yeah.
This isn't a one-time request. He's mentioned that very point
Okay.
multiple times, and I know that he tracks the data.
Yeah, so that might be just useful to kind of.
Sure.
And I know there is a group of residents that are sort of rallying on that issue.
So this document is just sort of a data dump. And
yeah.
and even though I'm presenting it as recommendations, I think there's a lot of conversation that might want to take place on any one of those line items before this board makes a decision either way.
Do we?
I'm not necessarily wanting or advocating to do that tonight because that 146 number might grow a little bit and might change someone's opinion about an individual item. But I would be prepared to answer questions about any one of them tonight or other nights.
Does the library charge for their meetings?
Non-town groups pay a honorarium, like a $10 or something, to use a meeting space. Maynard Garden Club, I think, for instance, they're not a
And I
town
think
group.
they,
And they only do it for nonprofits or, town, local groups, but not necessarily, town government doesn't pay.
right.
Okay.
They do charge to
Committees
like
don't.
private people though.
Yeah.
Like if I wanted to put my business, like have a seminar there would be a fee to use it.
And it would be
Okay,
higher than
yeah.
it would be for a
It is income
nonprofit.
producing, yeah.
That's what I meant. I mean,
It's a nominal amount of money, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't cover the cost of opening the library.
Right.
I don't have the figure in front of me, but
Okay.
for Steve to open the library, it requires him to hire 3 librarians because 3 floors of the building, so on. And it's roughly, say, $100, $120 per hour to open the doors.
Gotcha.
So,
And I think even for a for-profit company, the stipend piece was maybe $150 or something. It
Yeah,
wasn't-
it's pretty low.
minimal.
It's nominal.
Okay. So say for example, someone's having a meeting there, they can't limit the meetings to the Roosevelt Room on the first floor?
well, it's unlocking the building and then locking it back up when they leave, that sort of thing.
But I mean, like,
There's a
instead
little
of having to
bit
have someone staff all 3 floors, why can't the upper floors be closed?
They could absolutely do that. It would, and then be perhaps 1/3 the cost.
Okay, I didn't know if there's some sort of law. Once you open a library, it has to be open. I don't know.
No, I think Steve's saying if we're going to open it for extra meetings, I might as well let the general public use it as a library, and that would cost X.
Yeah, it's Wednesdays or something, right?
Yeah.
That's the evening they're not open now that he would recommend.
Right.
That was like his presentation to
Okay.
us.
Okay.
Some of this ties back to the 5-year plan that the library presented about a year ago.
Okay.
So it's, again, it's a consistent ask,
Yeah.
not something that popped up from nowhere.
Increase in usage and all that other stuff that he.
On priorities, it's fair, yeah.
A little priority. C, level C.
Yeah,
All right.
those are my opinions, and I can get into that detail if you
No,
wanted to.
no, I
but
don't,
there's-
I'm just, no.
It's a broad stroke for you to start considering.
No, no.
Agreed.
All right. Next would be your report that we all see.
Yes.
All sorts of pretty pictures and colors and.
Yeah, things that look like spring.
That's why Stephanie's in here, so
Stephanie
she
did
can
it.
get the
Stephanie was
credit
in-
for her hard work.
Stephanie was in California last week.
That didn't look like spring.
No, no.
Page 2.
Oh, man. Yeah.
They put a
Saw that
flower on the
picture
top,
before.
though. It was really nice of them.
I like the color.
I don't see Tinkerbell on this one, though.
You object to
All right.
Tinkerbell?
No, no, I'm not objecting to anything. All right, so, thanks for this report.
Yeah, excuse me, I
Appreciate
think I have an ad too.
So we moved the downtown overnight parking ban until April 1st. Hope everyone knows. You have what? You're adding on?
No, yeah, I'm sorry, there was something that came in, I wanted to make sure I mentioned it before the end of the night, but I'll find it and let you know. It's the invitation to go to the Magic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
We got that.
I believe I
Yeah,
sent
we
it
got
to
it,
you
we got it, yeah, we got it, yeah.
Okay.
Signed up for it. All right, so I just have, for me, I just congratulate Paul and Kristen Howes and their men's and women's boys and girls basketball teams for getting to the, one get to the state final and one get to the
Semi.
Central Mass Finals, and on a great season for both the boys and girls basketball teams. And then again, to, thanks to the DPW, because honestly, the roads in Maynard are, when compared to the towns around us that I travel on a daily basis, are exemplary compared to some of the other towns around us. So I think a lot of people do appreciate that travel in and out of town on a daily basis. I know I certainly do, so thank you for that. Melissa, your turn.
I just had a question. I got a lot of comments that people didn't know we had a special town meeting on Monday. Is it possible for us to do like a reverse 911 or put it on one of the boards? I know it's cold out, so we don't really have the boards out.
The voice of Maynard.
Good thing you're here, Steph.
I'll say almost definitely, but the reverse 911, that's one process, but we'll make sure it gets promoted.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Terrence?
I would just say second, the amount of work that the DPW has done with the emergency teams here over the last couple of weeks. Put the trees down, and the traffic having to be rerouted and all this stuff. Actually, I witnessed Aaron driving down the street, pulling over and moving trees off the middle of the road. So I thank you for that. And I'll just tell you the chairman's point on the road, the maintenance of the road. I drove by the Four Seasons in Boston last night and hit a pothole. Right, the Four Seasons. And haven't hit a pothole all winter in Maynard, so keep it up.
All right.
Thank you.
So one question I have been asked by a few people is, with the extremely high number of branches and stuff lying around people's yards, is there any plan to do anything with that? Are we will there be an opportunity to get those, to bring them to the town dump or whatever?
Or bring them curbside.
On that. I think
Compost.
There's been some confusion or miscommunication. Some people think that, they're pulling their own private brush to the edge of the road, expecting the town to pick it up, and that's not gonna be the case.
Okay.
What we'd expect is that people are responsible for their own brush that falls in their yard, and they're able to remove it. They have a couple options. They can contact the fire department, get a burn permit. They can save it for a chipping day that we have down at the DPW yard for like a recycling drop-off. They can contact a landscaper to have it be removed if they can't remove it. What we're probably gonna do after discussions is have a special chipping day, have an additional one or two once some of the snow melts, and people can bring their brush down to the yard, and we'll advertise that.
Okay.
And obviously, I think there's some people that will be physically unable to remove their own brush, and we'll deal with those on a case-by-case basis and assist those that have that actual need that aren't capable of bringing it down. But right now, I mean, you see people, the brush piles just keep growing on the edge of the roadways and the walkways, and what we ask is that people don't block the sidewalks with the brush, because that's impeding a public right of way. Be patient, because there's still a lot of brush that's in the snow piles, and it's not one, it's not safe for some people, or some of my crew to be able to access that.
Okay.
And, but we have a plan. You know, we're taking care of the brush that fell in the roadways, and we're going back and clearing that. Our priority was opening up the roadways for emergency vehicles and transportation. So we're making our way around.
Okay,
It's gonna take a few weeks.
okay, thank you. Could we get that onto the, into the town website somehow, IMA or something, just the bullet points, that, you're responsible, the town is gonna have chipping days, and those will be announced, just so that people understand that, we're not, because several people wanna know, well, when are they coming to pick up when are this town gonna come pick up the branches? I'm like, I don't think they are.
Yeah, we
So-
draft it, I'll work with stuff, and we'll get something on the website tomorrow.
All right, Terrence says another
One
point.
quick, you just jog my memory. So, I appreciate the sidewalk that goes up and down Acton Street. I can tell you this, I'm getting tired of snow throwing it and shoveling it, but it's a responsibility when you have a sidewalk, so I appreciate that. I could use a little bit of help from the town on letting 124 Acton Street know that when they plow their property, they're blocking the public way, they're plowing both sidewalks on both sides. So the edge of my house, so after I clear it out, Diane clears it out, they're plowing that all back in again, and they're doing the same thing on the other side, which, to my knowledge, is not the thing they should be doing.
Correct, yeah, that's against,
Yeah.
bylaws specifically.
So you can come up all the way at 122, and then you hit the edge of my property, you can't get through, you have to walk onto the street, and same thing, so.
Contact them.
That's it?
That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Gavin?
Two things, both school-related. You already commented on the basketball, which I was able to go to the Central Mass Finals in Worcester, WPI, to see both teams play. Very exciting morning, and I was very happy to be there. The second thing is if anybody hasn't gotten their tickets already, make sure you go see the play at the high school, which I saw Friday night. I think it was Friday. I saw it Saturday night, opening night. It's outstanding, as always. Great take, and the kids do a fabulous job, including our own videographer.
What's the play this week? Yeah.
Little
Is,
Mermaid.
Under the Sea, whatever that thing is.
The Little Mermaid.
Little Mermaid? Ah, who plays Ariel?
Olivia Palmer.
Your neighbor, right?
Who?
No, one of your neighbors is in it, by the way.
Olivia Palmer plays, and she does a fabulous
What's
job.
neighbor?
Ursula.
And then there are two eels, one of which is sitting in the room.
Von Comia's daughter plays Ursula.
I know where she is, okay. Well, that's nice, okay.
Yeah, she's outstanding, Merida.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see her.
They're all good.
So when I see her walking the dog from now, I'm like, Ursula? All right, Ms. Steele?
I
Ms.
have
Steele,
nothing to
Chelsea?
add.
Nothing to add, that's a rarity. All right, well,
Winding it down, huh?
it is 9:34, I make a motion to adjourn. David Gavin seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.